At my son's wedding, my daughter-in-law demanded the keys to my apartment in front of 150 guests. When I refused, she slapped me so hard I nearly fell over. I did not scream. I did not fight back. I simply pulled out my phone and made a call. 20 minutes later, a woman appeared at the door of the hall, and when they saw who it was, the laughter stopped and the crying began. My name is Wallace Jefferson. I am 68 years old, and for 30 years I worked as a sanitation supervisor in Brooklyn. To the world, and specifically to my son's new wife, I am just a retired garbage man with a small pension, calloused hands, and a wardrobe full of outdated suits. They see the dust on my boots, but they do not see the deeds in my safe. They do not know that the trash business taught me how to spot something valuable that others threw away. They do not know that I own 5 apartment blocks in Harlem and a penthouse in Brooklyn. They definitely do not know that I paid for the champagne they were drinking, the crystal chandeliers above their heads, and the silk dress clinging to my daughter-in-law's body. I kept my mouth shut because I wanted to see if my son Terrence had a backbone. I wanted to see if his wife Victoria loved him or the lifestyle he pretended to have. Tonight at the Plaza Hotel, I got my answer. The reception was a display of excess that made my stomach turn. Victoria had insisted on the most expensive venue in New York City. She wanted the gold leaf on the desserts and the imported orchids on every table. I sat at table 9 near the kitchen because Victoria said it was better if I stayed out of the photographs. She told me my old gray suit would clash with her aesthetic. I sat there sipping water, watching my son Terrence laugh nervously while his new wife held court like a queen. Terrence is 32, a good-looking boy, but soft. He has never had to work a double shift in the freezing rain. He has never had to fight for anything. I made his life too easy, and now watching him let his wife push him around, I realized I had made a terrible mistake. The music lowered and the spotlight hit the center of the dance floor. Victoria grabbed the microphone. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her smile was dazzling, but her eyes were cold. She looked like an angel, but I knew she was a shark. She tapped the microphone, the sound echoing through the grand ballroom. "Attention, everyone," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Before we cut the cake, I have a special announcement. We have decided to make a big change to start our new life together." The crowd cheered. I clapped politely, wondering what new expense she was about to announce. She looked directly at me, her smile widening into a smirk. "As you all know, Terrence and I need a proper home to raise a family, and we all know that family helps family. So we have decided that it is time for Terrence's father, Wallace, to finally retire properly." She reached into her purse and pulled out a glossy brochure. She waved it in the air. "We have found a wonderful community for you, Wallace. It is called Sunny Meadows. It is a lovely nursing home in Jersey. It is very affordable, and you will be with people your own age who can help you with your little memory issues." The room went silent for a heartbeat, and then a few of her friends started giggling. I froze. Sunny Meadows. I knew that place. It was a state-funded facility with a reputation for neglect and the smell of bleach and despair. I was 68, not 90. I ran 5 miles every morning. I managed a real estate portfolio worth millions. I did not have memory issues. Victoria continued, stepping closer to my table, the spotlight following her. "Since you will be moving there next week, we need you to hand over the keys to your apartment in Brooklyn. It is the perfect size for us to start our family. It is a little old-fashioned, but I can fix it up. It is the least you can do after Terrence has supported you for so long." The audacity took my breath away. Terrence supported me. I had been secretly transferring $3,000 a month into Terrence's account so he could pay his rent because he had been unemployed for 6 months and was too ashamed to tell her. I was the one keeping them afloat. The guests whispered. I could feel their eyes on me. They saw a tired old black man being done a favor by his benevolent white daughter-in-law. They thought she was being generous. They did not know she was evicting me to steal a penthouse with a view of the Manhattan skyline. I stood up slowly. My knees did not shake. I buttoned my jacket. "No," I said. My voice was low, but it carried across the silent room. Victoria laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "Excuse me, I do not think you understood, Wallace. This is not a request. We have already filled out the paperwork. You cannot live there alone anymore. You are getting confused. You need help." "I am not confused." "Victoria," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "and I am not giving you my home. That apartment belongs to me. I bought it with sweat and blood, and I will not be shipped off to a warehouse so you can play house in my living room." The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Victoria's face turned red. Her mask of sweetness slipped, revealing the ugly entitlement underneath. "You selfish old man," she hissed into the microphone, not caring who heard. "You spent your life picking up trash. You smell like garbage. You have always smelled like garbage. Do you think you deserve a penthouse? You deserve a cell. You are ruining my wedding day with your greed." Her friends at the head table started heckling. "Give her the keys, old man," someone shouted. "Do not be a burden," another yelled. "Go to the home, Grandpa." I looked at my son. Terrence was standing a few feet away holding a glass of champagne. He looked at his feet. He looked at the ceiling. He looked anywhere but at me. "Terrence," I said, "are you going to let her do this? Are you going to let her throw your father out of his own home?" Terrence looked up, his eyes wet with shame, but his voice was weak. "Dad, please, just give her the keys. It is for the best. You are getting older. We need the space. Just do it for me. Please, do not make a scene. A scene." They were publicly robbing me, stripping me of my dignity, and he was worried about a scene. That was the moment my heart broke. That was the moment the father in me died and the businessman woke up. I looked back at Victoria. "The answer is no," I said firmly. "Never." Victoria snapped. She dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud. She marched over to me, her white dress swishing around her legs, her face twisted in rage. She stopped inches from my face. I could smell the expensive perfume I had paid for. "You listen to me, you pathetic janitor," she screamed. "You are nothing. You are a zero. Give me the keys now, or I will have the police drag you out of here for trespassing." I did not move. I did not blink. "No," I repeated. And then it happened. Her hand moved faster than I expected. Smack. The sound of her palm hitting my face echoed off the high ceilings. It was a sharp, stinging blow that knocked my glasses off my face. They skittered across the marble floor. My cheek burned with a sudden intense heat. I tasted a little blood on my lip. The room gasped. Then silence. Absolute heavy silence. Nobody moved. Nobody came to help me. 150 people watched an old man get assaulted by a bride and nobody did a thing. Some of them looked away uncomfortable. Others, her friends, looked like they were holding back laughter. I looked at Terrence. He hadn't moved. He hadn't rushed forward to stop her. He hadn't yelled at her. He just stood there looking at his shoes, a coward in a tuxedo. Victoria stood over me, breathing hard, her chest heaving. "That is what you get," she spat. "Now get out. Get out of my wedding. Get out of our lives. We will take the apartment anyway. The law is on our side." I slowly bent down and picked up my glasses. One of the lenses was cracked. I put them back on my face. The world looked fractured through the broken glass, which felt appropriate. I took a handkerchief from my pocket and wiped the blood from my lip. I looked at Victoria one last time. I did not see a daughter-in-law. I saw an enemy. I reached into my pocket, but not for the keys. I pulled out my old, battered cell phone. I pressed the speed dial for the number 1 contact. I held the phone to my ear. The room was so quiet everyone could hear the dial tone. It was answered on the first ring. "Yes, sir." A crisp, professional female voice answered. "It is time," I said, my voice calm, cold, and steady. "Execute the protocol. Shut it down. All of it. And come get me. I am at the plaza." "I understand, sir. We are 5 minutes away." I hung up the phone and put it back in my pocket. Victoria laughed. "Who did you call the garbage truck to come pick you up?" I did not answer. I pulled out a chair and sat down. I crossed my legs. I waited. "You are not leaving," Victoria shrieked. "Security! Get him out of here!" 2 large security guards started walking toward me from the entrance. Terrence looked at me with pleading eyes, mouthing the word "go," but I stayed seated. Just as the guards reached my table, the lights in the ballroom flickered. The music, which had started up again, cut out abruptly with a dying groan. The air conditioning hum stopped. The room plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the emergency exit signs and the candles on the tables. Murmurs of confusion swept through the crowd. "What is happening?" Victoria yelled. "Turn the lights back on." Then the double doors at the main entrance slammed open with a force that rattled the frames. The light from the hallway poured in, silhouetting a group of people. There were 6 of them. 5 men in sharp, tailored black suits looking like Secret Service agents. And in the front, leading them, was a woman. She was tall, African-American with skin like dark chocolate and eyes that could cut glass. She wore a white power suit that cost more than Victoria's wedding dress. She walked with a stride that commanded authority. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like the ticking of a countdown clock. It was Anika Ross. The room froze. Everyone in New York knew who Anika Ross was. She was the toughest corporate litigator in the city, a woman who ate CEOs for breakfast. She was famous, feared, and incredibly expensive. She was the kind of lawyer you only saw on the news when a billion-dollar merger was happening or a senator was going to prison. Victoria's jaw dropped. She had applied for an internship at Anika's firm 3 times and had been rejected 3 times. She idolized this woman. Anika did not look at the guests. She did not look at the bride. She walked straight to my table, her team flanking her. The security guards who were about to grab me stepped back, intimidated by the sheer power radiating from her. Anika stopped in front of me. She ignored the blood on my lip. She ignored the cracked glasses. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of deep respect. "Mr. Jefferson," she said, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the room. "We received your signal. The assets have been frozen. The accounts are locked. The purchase of the apartment building on Fifth Avenue has been suspended until further notice." She turned around and faced the room, then looked directly at Victoria. Victoria was trembling. Her hands were shaking so hard her bouquet fell to the floor. "Ms. Ross." Victoria stammered. What are you doing here? Did you come for the wedding?" Anika looked at her like she was a bug on her windshield. "I am not here for your wedding, little girl. I am here for my boss." Anika pointed a manicured finger at me. "You just assaulted the chairman of Jefferson Holdings. You just slapped the man who owns the building you are standing in. You just humiliated the man who secretly paid for this entire circus you call a wedding." A gasp went through the room. It started as a ripple and turned into a wave. People looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. Chairman Terrence whispered. Dad, Anika handed me a tablet. "Sir, the payment for the reception has been revoked. The hotel manager is on his way. The cards linked to your son and his wife have been declined. The lease on their current apartment, which you guaranteed, has been terminated." I took the tablet. I stood up. I looked at Victoria, who was now pale as a sheet. "You wanted my keys, Victoria?" I asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key ring. It had a single rusty key on it. I tossed it onto the table. It made a metallic clink. "That is the key to the storage unit in the Bronx where I keep my old work boots. You can have that, because that is the only thing you are ever going to get from me." I turned to Anika. "Let's go. This place smells like trash." As we walked toward the door, the manager of the plaza ran in looking frantic, holding a bill for $150,000. He made a beeline for Terrence and Victoria. "Mr. and Mrs. Jefferson, the credit card on file has been reported stolen and locked by the owner. We need immediate payment for the event, or we will be contacting the authorities." I didn't look back. But as I walked out into the cool night air of Manhattan, I heard the sound I had been waiting for. It wasn't applause. It was the sound of Victoria starting to scream, and then the sound of her crying. The real wedding was over. The divorce was about to begin, and I had a lot of work to do. The silence in the ballroom was not the kind of silence you experience in a library or a church. It was the silence of a vacuum, a space where all the air had been sucked out, leaving 150 people gasping for breath. My cheek still throbbed with a dull, hot pulse where Victoria had slapped me, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the cold satisfaction settling in my chest. I watched the double doors swing open, and for a moment the light from the hallway seemed to blind the guests. Victoria, who was standing over me like a conqueror just seconds ago, turned her head. Her expression shifted instantly from rage to a grotesque mask of sycophantic delight. She recognized the woman leading the group of men in black suits. Everyone did. Anika Ross was not just a lawyer. She was a celebrity in the world of high-stakes litigation. She was the woman who dismantled monopolies and defended billionaires. Victoria had a picture of Anika on her vision board. I knew this because Terrence had told me once, laughing about how his fiancée wanted to be a power player. Now, seeing her idol walk through the doors of her wedding, Victoria's narcissism overrode her sanity. She forgot about the slap. She forgot about me. She forgot that she was screaming at an old man in front of her family. She smoothed the front of her expensive silk dress and patted her hair, stepping over my shattered glasses as if they were nothing more than debris on a sidewalk. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "It is Anika Ross." Victoria rushed forward. Her hands extended, a desperate smile plastered on her face. "Miss Ross," she gushed, practically tripping over her train. "I cannot believe you are here. I am Victoria. I sent you my resume last month. I am such a huge fan of your work. Did you come to wish us well?" Anika did not even break her stride. She did not look at Victoria's extended hand. She did not look at her dress. She looked through her as if Victoria were made of glass or perhaps something less significant like smoke. Annika walked straight past the bride, the groomsmen, and the stunned parents. Her heels clicked on the marble floor with a rhythm that sounded like a gavel striking a desk. Her team of 5 men flanked her, creating a wall of dark suits that separated the wedding party from reality. Victoria spun around, confused, her smile faltering. "Ms. Ross?" she asked, her voice higher now, tinged with panic. Annika stopped directly in front of my table. The room held its breath. I was still sitting, wiping a speck of blood from my lip with my handkerchief. Annika looked at the blood, and for a split second her eyes narrowed in a terrifying way. Then she bowed. It was not a casual nod. It was a formal, deep bow of respect, the kind you give to a head of state. "Mr. Chairman," she said, her voice clear and projecting to every corner of the silent room. "We received your signal. The security team is securing the perimeter. Your car is waiting at the private entrance." A gasp rippled through the crowd. I heard whispers of the word chairman. Victoria laughed, a nervous, jagged sound that grated on the ears. "Chairman," she sputtered, walking back towards us, "you have made a mistake. That is just Wallace. He is a retired sanitation worker. He fixes toilets. You must be looking for someone else." Annika turned slowly. She looked at Victoria with an expression of profound boredom. "I do not make mistakes, little girl," Annika said. Her voice was low, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. "And you will address him as Mr. Jefferson. This man is the founder and majority shareholder of Jefferson Holdings. He owns the building we are standing in. He owns the apartment you are trying to steal. And until 30 seconds ago, he was the owner of the American Express Centurion card that was paying for this entire charade." Victoria froze, her face drained of color, turning a pasty, sickly white. She looked at me, then at Annika, then at Terrence. Terrence was shaking his head, his eyes wide with horror. He knew I had some savings, but he had no idea of the empire I had built while he was busy playing video games and failing college classes. "That is impossible," Victoria whispered. "He drives a Ford truck. He wears cheap suits. He wears what he wants because he does not need to impress people like you," Annika retorted sharply. "Now step back. You are in my client's personal space." One of the security guards stepped forward, placing his large frame between me and Victoria. I finally stood up. My legs felt strong. I looked at Annika. "Is it done?" I asked. "It is done, sir," she replied efficiently. "We have executed the kill switch on all accounts linked to your social security number. The supplementary cards held by your son and his wife have been deactivated. The wire transfer for the honeymoon in the Maldives has been recalled. The lease on their apartment in Chelsea, which you guaranteed, has been terminated effective immediately for breach of contract." "Breach of contract?" Terrence squeaked. His voice was so high he sounded like a child. "What breach?" "Assaulting the guarantor is a violation of the morality clause in the trust agreement," Annika said, not even looking at him. "You stood by and watched your wife physically attack your father. The contract is void." I looked at Terrence. He was trembling. "Dad, please," he begged. "You cannot do this. This is our wedding." "There is no wedding," I said. I looked at the manager of the plaza, Mr. Henderson, who had materialized at the edge of the dance floor looking like he was about to have a heart attack. "Mr. Henderson," I called out. "Yes, Mr. Jefferson." The manager rushed over, sweating profusely. "I am revoking authorization for all charges related to this event," I said calmly. "As of this moment, I am not paying for a single flower, a single bottle of wine, or a single slice of cake. If these people wish to continue their party, they will need to provide an alternative method of payment." Mr. Henderson turned to Terrence and Victoria. He was no longer the obsequious host. He was a businessman staring at a massive loss. "Mr. Jefferson, Mrs. Jefferson," he said, his voice tight. "The outstanding balance for the venue, the catering and the service staff is $152,000. I need a valid credit card or a wire transfer confirmation immediately. If we cannot settle this in the next 10 minutes, I will be forced to shut down the event and contact the authorities for theft of services." $150,000, Victoria shrieked. "We do not have that kind of money. Wallace is supposed to pay." I promised to pay for a wedding," I said, my voice cold. "I did not promise to pay for my own public humiliation." "You slapped the hand that feeds you, Victoria. Now you can starve." Annika pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. "Shut it down," she said into the device. The reaction was instant. The crystal chandeliers overhead flickered and then dimmed to the emergency setting, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. The air conditioning units groaned and powered down. The band, realizing they were not getting paid, started packing up their instruments mid-song. Then the waiters moved in. It was like a military operation. They moved from table to table, snatching plates of filet mignon and lobster from under the guests' noses. They took the half-empty bottles of champagne. They blew out the candles. "Hey, I was eating that," a guest shouted. "Sorry, sir," a waiter replied. "The bill has not been paid." Victoria watched in horror as a team of staff rolled the 5-tier wedding cake away before she even had a chance to cut it. "My cake," she screamed. "Bring that back. Pay for it and they will bring it back," I said. Victoria turned on me, her eyes wild. She looked like a trapped animal. "I will sue you," she screamed. "I will take everything you have. You senile old man." Annika stepped forward, her presence dominating the room. "I wish you would try," Annika said softly. "I really do. My team of lawyers is bored. They would love to tear you apart in court. We have footage of the assault. We have witnesses. We have the financial records proving years of embezzlement by your husband from his father's accounts." Terrence gasped. "You knew," he whispered. "I know everything, Terrence," I said. "I knew about the job you lost 8 months ago. I knew about the gambling debts. I knew you were stealing from my retirement fund small amounts you thought I wouldn't notice. I let it slide because I wanted to see if you would fix it. But you didn't. You just found a wife who was even greedier than you." I turned to Annika. "I am ready to leave." "Yes, sir." We began to walk out. The guests parted like the Red Sea. They stared at me with wide eyes. They weren't looking at the garbage man anymore. They were looking at the man who just turned the lights out on the party of the year. I saw shame in some of their faces. I saw fear in others. "Wait!" Victoria yelled. She ran after us, grabbing my arm. The security guard intercepted her before she could touch me, pushing her back gently but firmly. She stumbled and fell onto the floor, her white dress billowing around her like a deflated parachute. "Please," she sobbed, her arrogance finally breaking under the weight of reality. "We have nowhere to go. Our apartment is locked. We have no money. You cannot leave us on the street. It is our wedding night." I stopped and looked down at her. "You wanted my apartment, Victoria?" I asked. She nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "I told you," I said. "I will never give you the keys to my home, but I am a generous man." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was a coupon I had been saving in my wallet. "Here," I said, dropping it onto her lap. "It is a voucher for 2 nights at the Motel 6 on the highway. It expires tomorrow. Happy honeymoon." I turned my back on them. I walked out of the ballroom, through the gilded lobby of the plaza, and out into the cool night air of Manhattan. A long black limousine was waiting at the curb. The driver held the door open for me. I sat in the back seat, the leather soft and cool. Annika sat across from me. She opened a bottle of water and handed it to me. "Are you okay, Wallace?" she asked, dropping the formality for a moment. I took a sip of water. My lip had stopped bleeding. "I am fine, Annika. I feel lighter." We watched from the tinted windows as the security team escorted Terrence and Victoria out of the hotel. They were crying. They were shouting at each other. Victoria was hitting Terrence with her bouquet. They stood on the sidewalk looking lost. Terrence pulled out his phone, tapping frantically. I knew what he was seeing. Account suspended, card declined. He tried to hail a cab, but without cash and without a working card, no one would take them. They were stranded in their wedding finery, a king and queen with no kingdom standing in the dirt they thought they were too good for. "Drive," I said to the driver. The car pulled away, merging into the city traffic. I did not feel guilt. I did not feel regret. I felt the immense relief of a man who had finally taken out the trash. The wedding was over, but my life was just beginning. I had a foundation to launch a business to run, and a peace of mind to enjoy. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly who was on my team. While I was being driven to my secure estate in the back of a luxury limousine, sipping sparkling water, my son and his new wife were experiencing a very different kind of ride. They were crammed into the back of a dirty yellow taxi that smelled of stale tobacco and regret. The driver had agreed to take them to Queens only because Terrence had offered him the platinum watch off his wrist. It was a fake watch, a knockoff I knew he had bought in Chinatown to impress Victoria, but the driver did not know that yet. They arrived at the Galaxy Motel in Queens shortly after midnight. It was the kind of place where they charge by the hour and the sheets are never quite white. The neon sign outside was broken, buzzing and flickering like a dying insect. Victoria, in her $20,000 custom silk wedding gown, looked like a diamond dropped in the mud. Her train dragged across the oil-stained asphalt of the parking lot, collecting grime and cigarette butts. Terrence walked behind her, his tuxedo rumpled, his tie undone, looking like a man marching to the gallows. I was not there, but I know exactly what happened. I know because I know my son, and I know the woman he married. And I know that when you strip away the money, the credit cards, and the safety net people show you exactly who they are. They walked into the lobby. It was behind bulletproof glass. The night clerk did not even look up from his magazine. "We need a room," Terrence said, his voice trembling. $70, the clerk grunted. "Cash or card?" "Card," Terrence said quickly. He pulled out the emergency credit card he kept in his wallet, the one he thought I did not know about. The one linked to the trust fund I had set up for him when he was 21. He slid the card through the slot under the glass. The clerk swiped it. Declined. Terrence frowned. "Try it again. It must be a chip error. It has a $50,000 limit." The clerk swiped it again, harder this time. Declined. Stolen card alert. I have to keep it. "What?" Terrence shouted. "You cannot keep it. That is my card. My father." He stopped. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His father. Me. I had not just cut off the main cards, I had scorched the earth, I had frozen everything. Victoria pushed him aside. Her face was streaked with mascara tears, but her eyes were dry and furious. "Use the other one," she hissed. "The one you use for business expenses." Terrence swallowed hard. He pulled out a blue card. Declined. He pulled out a third one. Declined. Victoria began to panic. She dug into her small bridal clutch. She pulled out her own cards. The ones she used to buy designer shoes and spa treatments. The ones she paid off using the joint account I funded. Declined, declined, declined. The clerk looked at them with boredom. "Look, folks, if you do not have money, you need to leave. This is a business, not a shelter." Victoria let out a scream of pure frustration. It was a primal sound, the sound of a spoiled child being told no for the first time in her life. She ripped the diamond earrings from her ears. Here she screamed, throwing them under the glass. "Take these. They are worth $2,000. Just give us a room. A clean one." The clerk picked up the earrings. He examined them under the light. He shrugged. "Room 104, down the hall. Checkout is at 11. They walked down the hallway, which smelled of mildew and cheap air freshener. They entered room 104. It was small. The wallpaper was peeling. The carpet had stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood. There was a single bed with a thin blanket. Victoria stood in the middle of the room and she started to laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laughter of someone losing their mind. "This is it," she said, spinning around, her arms wide. "This is my wedding night, a motel in Queens." She turned on Terrence. Her eyes were wild. "Fix this," she demanded. "Call your bank. Call your investors. You said you had assets. You said you had crypto. You said you were launching a tech startup. Transfer the money. Get us out of here." Terrence sat on the edge of the sagging bed. He put his head in his hands. "I cannot," he whispered. "What do you mean you cannot?" Victoria shrieked. "You are Terrence Jefferson. You are an entrepreneur." Terrence looked up. His face was pale. The lies he had been telling her for 2 years, the lies I had allowed him to tell because I kept bailing him out, were about to evaporate. "There is no startup, Victoria," he said softly. "There never was." Victoria froze. "What, I do not have any investors?" Terrence admitted, his voice cracking. "I have not had a job in 8 months. The money for the apartment, the money for the car, the money for your ring. It all came from my dad. He gave me an allowance. He paid for everything." The silence in that dirty motel room was heavier than the silence in the ballroom had been. Victoria looked at him as if he were a stranger, as if he were a monster. "You lied to me," she whispered. "You told me you were rich. You told me you were successful." "I wanted you to love me," Terrence cried. "I thought if I looked successful, you would stay. I was going to figure it out. I was going to get a job." "You are a loser," Victoria spat. She did not yell this time. Her voice was cold and flat. "You are a broke, pathetic loser. I married a man with nothing." She looked down at her wedding dress. It was stained with dirt from the street. She looked at the ring on her finger, which she now knew was bought with my money. "You tricked me," she said. "You trapped me." "I love you," Terrence said, reaching for her hand. "Do not touch me," she recoiled. "You do not love me. You bought me, and now the credit card has been declined." She walked into the tiny bathroom and slammed the door. Terrence sat on the bed and wept. He cried for the life he had lost. He cried for the father he had betrayed, but mostly he cried because he was weak and he knew it. Inside the bathroom, Victoria stared at herself in the cracked mirror. Her makeup was ruined. Her hair was a mess. She looked like a tragedy. But Victoria was not the kind of woman who accepted tragedy. She was a survivor. She was a predator. And predators do not cry. They hunt. She washed her face with the harsh motel soap. She fixed her hair as best she could. She looked at her reflection and she made a decision. She had lost the battle in the ballroom. She had lost the penthouse. She had lost the rich husband. But she still had one thing left. She had her phone. And she had an audience. She pulled her smartphone out of her purse. She had hours of footage from the wedding. Videos her friends had sent her. Clips she had recorded herself before the disaster. She sat on the closed toilet lid and opened her video editing app. She found the clip of the confrontation. The angle was perfect. It showed me standing up. It showed me looking cold and angry. It showed me tossing the rusty key onto the table. But Victoria was smart. She was manipulative. She highlighted the clip where I said, "The answer is no, never." She highlighted the part where I said, "You can have the key to the storage unit." Then she did the most important part. She cut the video. She removed the beginning where she insulted me on the microphone. She removed the part where she called me a janitor. And most importantly, she removed the slap. In her version of the story, she was not the aggressor. She was the victim. She was the blushing bride pleading with a cruel tyrant. She recorded a new voiceover. She made her voice tremble. She forced tears into her eyes. "Guys," she whispered into the phone camera, the background a plain white wall that could be anywhere. "I do not even know what to say. My heart is shattered. On my wedding night, my father-in-law threw us out on the street. He has always hated me because I am not rich like them. He cut us off because we wanted to be independent. He left us homeless on our wedding night. Please pray for us. We just wanted to be happy." She added sad piano music to the background. She added filters to make herself look paler, more fragile. She titled the video, "Toxic Billionaire Father-in-Law Ruins Wedding and Evicts Son." She added the hashtags, #wedding-nightmare, #toxic-family, #narcissist, #homeless, #please help. She watched it once. It was a masterpiece of fiction. It made me look like a monster and her like a martyr. She posted it to TikTok, then she posted it to Instagram, then she posted it to Twitter. She walked out of the bathroom. Terrence was curled up on the bed, still crying. She looked at him with disgust. "Get up," she said. "We have work to do." "What are you doing?" Terrence asked, sniffing. "I am getting our repayment," Victoria said. "He took our money. I am going to take his reputation." While my son and his wife plotted in the dark, I was sleeping peacefully in the guest suite of Anika Ross's penthouse. I thought the war was over. I thought I had won. I did not know that while I slept, the digital world was catching fire. The video started slow, a few hundred views, then a few thousand. But anger is the best fuel for the internet. People love to hate a villain, and Victoria had painted me as the ultimate villain. The rich, heartless old man crushing young love. By 3 in the morning, the video had hit 100,000 views. By 5 in the morning, it was at 500,000. Comments poured in. What a monster. This is why I hate the rich. Someone needs to find where this man lives. Boycott Jefferson Holdings. Poor girl, she looks devastated. Victoria stayed awake all night, liking comments, replying to sympathizers, fueling the fire. She shared my name. She shared the location of my building in Brooklyn. She weaponized her tears. When the sun rose over New York City, the video had crossed 1 million views. It was trending nationwide. I woke up at 7 o'clock feeling refreshed. I made myself a cup of coffee. I walked to the window to look out at the city I helped keep clean for 30 years. My phone rang. It was Anika. "Wallace." She said, her voice urgent. "Do not go near the window. Do not go outside." Why, I asked, confused. "It is a beautiful morning." Sir Anika said, "Check the news. Check social media." I turned on the television. The local news channel was on. The headline at the bottom of the screen made my blood run cold. "Billionaire bully viral video sparks outrage against real estate mogul." And there on the screen was my face. The edited video of me throwing the key was playing on a loop. I walked to the window and looked down. My building in Brooklyn was visible in the distance. But I did not need to see Brooklyn to know what was happening. Even here outside Anika's building, I could see them. Reporters, vans with satellite dishes, and a crowd of people holding signs. They were not at my apartment. They had found me here. I looked closer. They were holding signs that said "Justice for the Bride" and "Eat the Rich." My phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. "We know where you are, old man. You are going to pay for what you did to that poor girl." I lowered the blinds. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from a cold, hard realization. Victoria had not just slapped me in the ballroom, she had slapped me in front of the whole world. And the world was hitting back. I sat down in the leather chair. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. "So that is how you want to play it, Victoria," I whispered to the empty room. "You want a show? You want a public trial?" I picked up my phone. I did not call the police. I called my team. "Fine," I said. "Let us give them a show they will never forget. But first I need to show them the uncut footage." The battle for my reputation had just begun, and I was about to teach my daughter-in-law that the internet never forgets, but the truth always leaves a paper trail. The first egg hit the reinforced glass of the lobby door with a dull thud, leaving a slimy trail of yellow yolk sliding down the pane. It was followed by a tomato, then a rock that bounced harmlessly off the impact-resistant safety glass. I stood in the security control room of my building watching the monitors with a cup of Earl Grey tea in my hand. The steam rose gently, curling around my face, contrasting sharply with the chaotic scene playing out on the screens in front of me. Outside on the sidewalk, a crowd of about 50 people had gathered. They were holding signs painted with hastily scrawled slogans. "Justice for Victoria," "Stop Elder Abuse," "Eat the Rich." They were young, mostly fueled by the viral outrage of the internet and the edited video my daughter-in-law had posted. They did not know me. They did not know that I had built this building with union labor paying every worker above the market rate. They did not know that I donated 20% of my annual income to the local community center. All they knew was the narrative Victoria had fed them, the narrative of a cruel billionaire father throwing his son and new wife into the street on their wedding night. Anika stood beside me, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression unreadable. She tapped the screen where a young man with a megaphone was screaming insults at the building facade. "Shall I call the police, sir?" she asked, her voice cool and detached. "We have grounds for trespassing and vandalism." I took a sip of tea, allowing the bergamot flavor to settle on my tongue before answering. "No," I said. "Let them scream. Let them throw eggs. If we call the police, Victoria will spin it. She will say I am using my wealth to silence the people. We need to let them exhaust themselves. Besides, glass can be cleaned. Reputation is harder to scrub, but we will get there." I turned away from the monitors and walked over to the large flat-screen television on the wall. The morning news show was on. The host, a woman with overly white teeth and a concerned expression, was leaning forward in her chair. Sitting opposite her was Victoria. My daughter-in-law had certainly been busy. She was no longer wearing her wedding dress. She was dressed in a modest beige cardigan and jeans, looking pale and fragile. She held a tissue in her hand, dabbing at dry eyes. "It is just so hard," Victoria was saying, her voice trembling perfectly for the camera. "We noticed the signs a few months ago, but we did not want to admit it. Wallace has been getting confused. He forgets things. He gets aggressive. Last night at the wedding, he snapped. He did not know who we were. He thought we were trying to rob him." The host nodded sympathetically. "So you are saying this was not about money, it was about a medical episode?" "Exactly," Victoria sobbed. "We tried to get him help. We tried to get him into a facility where he would be safe. That is why he got so angry. He is paranoid. He thinks everyone is out to get him. And now he has locked us out and left us with nothing. We just want him to be safe. We just want our dad back." I watched the performance with a mixture of disgust and professional admiration. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She had pivoted from the victim of greed to the victim of a medical tragedy. She was painting me not just as mean, but as mentally unstable. It was a dangerous game. I looked at Anika. "Are we recording this?" "Every second," Sir Anika replied, tapping her tablet. "We are also archiving the comments, the tweets, and the threats. This is defamation per se. She is accusing you of a medical condition you do not have to justify her attempted theft. The damages will be astronomical." I nodded and turned back to the security monitors. The mob outside was getting louder. Someone had brought a can of spray paint and was writing the word "tyrant" on the limestone columns of the entrance. My heartbeat remained steady, 60 beats per minute. I checked my pulse just to be sure. I was not afraid. I was not panicked. I remembered the winter of 1982. I was a young supervisor for the sanitation department in Harlem. It was a different time, a different city. The streets were rougher. There was a local gang leader named Red who decided that the garbage trucks could not pass through his block unless we paid a tax. He blocked the street with burning tires and stood there with 10 of his men holding baseball bats and chains. My crew was terrified. They wanted to turn back. They wanted to skip the block, but I knew if we backed down, once we would be paying that tax forever. I got out of the truck. I was unarmed. I was wearing my orange vest and my work boots. I walked right up to Red. The smoke from the tires was thick and choking. He swung a bat at my head. He stopped it an inch from my nose just to scare me. I did not flinch. I did not blink. I looked him in the eye and I told him that the only thing stopping me from doing my job was him, and I had a schedule to keep. I told him he could beat me. He could put me in the hospital, but tomorrow there would be 2 trucks. And the day after that, there would be the police. And the day after that, I would be back. Red looked at me for a long time. He saw something in my eyes. He saw that I was not a man who could be bullied. He kicked the tires aside and let us pass. We never had a problem on that block again. Compared to Red and his baseball bat, a bunch of college kids with eggs and a lying girl on television were nothing. They were noise. They were dust. I finished my tea and set the cup down on the saucer. Document the graffiti, I told Anika. We will add the cleaning costs to the lawsuit and send a cease and desist letter to the television station. Tell them if they air that segment again without checking the facts, we will buy their network just to fire the producer. Anika smiled, a rare, sharp expression that showed her teeth. With pleasure, sir. Just then, my personal cell phone rang. It was sitting on the console table, buzzing against the wood. The screen lit up with a photo I had taken years ago. It was a picture of Terrence at his college graduation, smiling and proud. It felt like looking at a ghost. I picked up the phone. Hello, Terrence. Dad Terrence's voice was tight, strained. He sounded like he was in a tunnel or maybe just hiding in a bathroom. Dad, you have to stop this. Stop what I asked. Calmly. Stop sitting in my own home while people vandalize my property. Stop watching your wife lie about me on national television. You know what I mean, Terrence hissed. The accounts, the cards. We cannot buy food, Dad. We are at a motel. It is disgusting. Victoria is falling apart. She is pregnant, Dad. Did you know that? She is pregnant with your grandchild and you are putting her through this stress. I paused. Pregnant. It was a good card to play. It was the kind of lie that usually worked on grandparents. But I had seen the medical reports from the insurance plan I paid for. I knew Victoria had an IUD. I knew she was not pregnant. She is not pregnant, Terrence, I said, my voice flat. And if she is, she should see a doctor using her own insurance, which I am no longer paying for. There was a silence on the line. I could hear him breathing heavy and fast. Fine, he said, dropping the act. You want to play hardball? Here is the deal. You transfer the deed to the Brooklyn penthouse to us today. You sign a non-disclosure agreement promising never to talk about the wedding. You reinstate my allowance. If you do that, Victoria will go back on TV tomorrow. She will say it was a misunderstanding. She will say you are back on your meds and doing better. She will call off the mob. I listened to his demands. I listened to my son try to blackmail me. I wondered where I had gone wrong. Had I given him too much? Had I shielded him too much from the harsh realities of the world? I had tried to give him the life I never had, but in doing so, I had deprived him of the struggle that made me a man. Is that your final offer? I asked. It is the only offer, Terrence said, trying to sound tough. If you do not agree, we are going to escalate this. Victoria has lawyers interested. They want to file for emergency guardianship. They say you are a danger to yourself and others. They will put you in a facility, Dad. Do not make us do that. I looked at Anika. She was monitoring the call, tracing the location. She nodded at me, confirming she had the recording. Terrence, I said, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am not senile. I am not confused. And I am certainly not afraid of you. You have made your bed in a motel in Queens and now you are going to sleep in it. But Dad, he started. No, I cut him off. You threatened me. You tried to blackmail me. You are done. Do not call this number again. The next time you hear from me, it will be through a process server. I hung up the phone. I did not slam it down. I pressed the end call button with a gentle, deliberate motion. Block his number, I told Anika. Blocked, she confirmed. I looked back at the screen. The news segment was over, but the damage was done. The crowd outside was growing. The graffiti was getting larger. But inside the control room, it was quiet. On the other side of the city, in the cramped bathroom of the motel room, Terrence stared at his phone in disbelief. He hung up, he whispered. Victoria was sitting on the edge of the bathtub filing her nails. She looked up, her eyes cold and calculating. He said, "No." Terrence asked. He said, "See you in court." Terrence replied, his voice shaking. He said, "He knows you are not pregnant." Victoria threw the nail file into the trash can. She stood up and walked over to the mirror, checking her reflection. She looked tired but determined. The tears she had shed on TV were gone, replaced by a steely resolve. "Fine," she said. "He wants a war, we will give him a war. He thinks he is tough because he has money. But he is old. And in this country, the law protects the vulnerable, or at least those who can play the victim well enough." She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had saved earlier that morning. It was the number of a doctor her friend had recommended. A doctor known for being flexible with his diagnoses, if the price was right. "Hello, Dr. Vance," she said, her voice shifting instantly into the worried daughter-in-law persona. "Yes, this is Victoria Jefferson. We spoke earlier. It is about my father-in-law. The situation has deteriorated. He is becoming violent. We need to move forward with the competency hearing immediately." "Yes, we can pay. We will find the money. Just tell us what we need to do to get those papers signed." She hung up the phone and looked at Terrence. "Pack your bags," she said. "We are leaving this dump. We need to look presentable for the judge." "Where are we going?" Terrence asked. "We are going to verify your inheritance," Victoria said. "If he won't give us the keys, we are going to have the state take them for us." Back in my command center, I watched the sun begin to set over the city. The shadows lengthened, covering the angry crowd outside in darkness. They were still screaming, but their voices sounded distant, muted by the thick glass. Anika walked over to me. "Sir, we have confirmation. Victoria just contacted Dr. Vance. He is a known entity. He has been flagged for insurance fraud before but never convicted. He specializes in expedited competency evaluations." I nodded slowly. "So they are going for the insanity plea." "It appears so," Anika said. "They will try to get an emergency order to freeze your assets and place you under guardianship. They will claim you are squandering the estate due to dementia." I turned away from the window. "Let them try," I said. "Let them file the papers. Let them swear under oath. Because when you swear under oath and you lie, it is not just a family dispute anymore, it is perjury, and perjury is a crime." I walked toward the door of the control room. "Anika, get the car ready." "Where are we going, sir?" she asked. "We are going to see a doctor," I said. "Not Dr. Vance. My doctor. We need a clean bill of health dated today. And then we are going to prepare a little trap for Dr. Vance. If they want to play the medical game, let us show them how a real operation is conducted." The siege was over. The counterattack was about to begin, and I was going to use their own weapon, the law, to dismantle them piece by piece. I sat in the leather chair of Anika Ross's private office wearing a pair of high-definition noise-canceling headphones. The room was soundproof, a fortress of glass and steel high above the noise of Manhattan, but the filth I was listening to made me feel like I was back in the sewers. On the screen in front of me, a digital waveform spiked and dipped, matching the voices coming through the audio feed. My private investigator had earned his fee. He had managed to slip a listening device into the flower arrangement on Dr. Vance's desk just hours before Victoria arrived. "I need this done today." Dr. Victoria's voice was tight, desperate. She sounded like a cornered animal. "He is erratic, he is violent, he thinks he is a billionaire real estate tycoon, he is just a retired sanitation worker, for God's sake. He needs to be in a secure facility." I listened to her lies without flinching. She was painting a picture of a delusional old man constructing a fantasy world to justify locking me away. Dr. Vance cleared his throat. I knew Vance by reputation. He was a man who had lost his medical ethics somewhere between his second divorce and his third gambling debt. He operated out of a clinic in the Bronx that was little more than a pill mill. "A conservatorship is a serious legal step," Mrs. Jefferson Vance said, his voice oily and smooth. "It requires a diagnosis of severe cognitive decline. Usually Alzheimer is, or advanced dementia. That takes testing time and observation." "We do not have time," Victoria snapped. "He is spending the money. He is ruining our lives. I can pay you. We have $50,000 in cash." The waveform on the screen spiked. $50,000. It was the money she had stolen from the credit cards before I locked them. It was my money being used to buy my own imprisonment. 50,000, Vance mused. Well, if the patient is truly as dangerous as you say, perhaps an expedited evaluation is in order. I can prepare the papers. I can certify that I have treated him for years and that his decline has been rapid. But I need to see him, even for 5 minutes. I need him on camera in my office, so I have plausible deniability. He will never come here, Victoria said. He thinks everyone is plotting against him. Get him here, Vance said. Tell him it is for insurance. Tell him it is a mandatory checkup for his pension. Just get him in the room. I will handle the rest. Once I sign the affidavit of incompetence, you can take it to the police. They will enforce an emergency psychiatric hold. He will be in Sunny Meadows by tonight. I took off the headphones and looked at Anika. She was staring at the floor, her fists clenched. This is a felony, she said quietly. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Medical fraud. We have them, Wallace. We can call the FBI right now. I shook my head. Not yet, I said. Why? Anika asked, looking up. We have the recording. Because a recording can be argued in court, I said. A good lawyer could say they were speaking hypothetically. They could say Victoria was exaggerating out of concern. No, Anika. I need him to sign the papers. I need him to commit the act. And I need something else. What do you need, sir? I need him to certify that I am sane, I said, standing up. Anika looked confused. He just agreed to certify you are insane for 50 grand. Why would he sign the opposite? Because he is arrogant, I said, walking to the window. He thinks I am a confused old garbage man. He thinks I am stupid. I am going to walk into that office, Anika. I am going to give him the show he wants. And while he is busy counting his blood money, he is going to sign his own death warrant. Anika did not like it. She wanted to send in the police. But she worked for me. She prepared the document. I asked for a single sheet of paper indistinguishable from the standard medical liability forms Vance used. But the text was very different. It was an affidavit of sound mind and physical health, dated and time-stamped, certifying that the patient Wallace Jefferson was fully cognizant and capable of managing his own affairs. 2 hours later, I stood in front of Dr. Vance's clinic. It was a brick building with barred windows and a sign that had missing letters. I had changed my clothes. I was wearing an old stained cardigan over a wrinkled shirt. I had left my dentures and a glass of water back at the hotel, so my mouth looked sunken, my speech slightly slurred. I ruffled my hair, making it stand up on one side. I stopped shaving 3 days ago, so my face was covered in gray stubble. I looked at my reflection in the clinic window. I did not see Wallace Jefferson, the chairman. I saw the man Victoria wanted me to be. A confused, helpless relic. I shuffled into the waiting room. It smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The receptionist, a woman who looked like she hated the world, looked up from her magazine. "Help you?" she grunted. "I am here to see the doctor," I mumbled, letting my hands tremble. "My daughter-in-law sent me. Something about my pension checks. Name, Wallace. Wallace Jefferson." She checked a list. "Sit down. He will see you." I sat on a plastic chair that felt like it would break under my weight. I waited. 10 minutes later, the door opened and Dr. Vance appeared. He was shorter than I expected, wearing a white coat that was a little too tight around the middle. He wore a gold watch that looked fake. "Mr. Jefferson," he said, flashing a practiced smile. "Come on in." I stood up slowly, feigning a struggle. I dragged my feet as I followed him into his office. He closed the door and sat behind his desk. He did not offer me a seat. He wanted to keep this short. "So, Wallace," he said, picking up a pen, "your family tells me you have been having some trouble lately, forgetting things, getting angry." I looked around the room, eyes wide and fearful. "They want my money?" I whispered, leaning in. "They want to take my house. I have to hide the keys." Vance nodded, scribbling on a notepad. "Paranoia," he muttered to himself, but loud enough for the camera in the corner to pick up. "Disorientation." He pulled a stack of papers from his drawer. These were the papers Victoria had paid for, the commitment papers. "The medical certification of Alzheimer is disease. I need you to sign these forms." "Wallace," he said, pushing them across the desk. "It is just standard procedure for your insurance, so you can keep getting your checks." I looked at the papers. I pretended to read them, moving my lips silently. My hands shook violently, rattling the paper against the desk. "I do not understand," I said, my voice cracking. "The words are moving." "It is okay," Vance said impatiently. Just sign at the X, then you can go home. I reached into my pocket. I have my own papers, I said, pulling out the document Anika had prepared. It was folded up, looking crumpled and old. My boss said I need the doctor to sign this too. For the union, if I do not get it signed, they stop my benefits. Vance looked at the paper with disdain. He did not want to read it. He wanted me out of his office. He wanted his $50,000. Fine, he snapped, snatching the paper from my hand. Where do I sign? Bottom line, I pointed. He didn't even look at the header. He didn't read the paragraph stating that he had conducted a full neurological exam and found zero evidence of cognitive decline. He just saw a place to sign and scribbled his signature, Dr. Arthur Vance, M.D. There, he said, thrusting the paper back at me. Now sign mine. I took his pen. I signed the commitment papers, but I did not sign Wallace Jefferson. I signed a name I knew would be legally invalid, but looked close enough to pass a quick glance. I signed William Jefferson, my father's name, a dead man. Thank you, doctor, I said, tucking my real medical certificate into my pocket. You are a good man. Vance smirked. Just doing my job, Wallace. Now go on. Your daughter-in-law is waiting outside. I shuffled out of the office. As I opened the door, I saw Victoria sitting in her car across the street. She was wearing sunglasses, watching like a hawk. When she saw me leave, she waited for me to turn the corner before she ran into the clinic. I walked to the end of the block where Anika was waiting in the limousine. I got in and straightened my back. I took out my dentures and put them back in. I smoothed my hair. Did you get it? Anika asked. I handed her the paper. Signed and dated, I said. According to Dr. Vance. I am the sanest man in New York. Anika looked at the paper and smiled. And the commitment papers, signed by a ghost, I said. Anika tapped on the partition. Drive, she told the driver. We need to get to the precinct before Victoria does. While we drove through traffic, Victoria was inside. Dr. Vance's office collecting her prize. He signed them. Vance said, handing her the thick folder. I noted extreme paranoia, verbal aggression, and advanced cognitive deterioration. This will hold up in any court. You can take this straight to the police station. They will issue the order immediately. Victoria took the folder. She felt the weight of it. It felt like victory. It felt like the keys to the penthouse. Thank you, doctor, she said. You have saved our family. She handed him a thick envelope filled with cash. Pleasure doing business with you, Vance said, counting the money. Victoria walked out of the clinic feeling invincible. She called Terrence. I have it, she said, her voice trembling with adrenaline. I have the papers. I am going to the police station now. Meet me there. We are going to end this tonight. 20 minutes later, Victoria marched into the 19th precinct. She walked up to the desk sergeant, a burly man who looked like he had seen everything. I need to speak to an officer immediately, she said, slamming the folder onto the high desk. I have a medical emergency order for a committal. My father-in-law is a danger to himself and the public. He is violent and mentally unstable. I need a police escort to take him to Sunny Meadows facility. The sergeant looked at her, then at the folder. Name of the individual, Wallace Jefferson. The sergeant paused. He typed something into his computer. His eyebrows went up. Wallace Jefferson, he repeated. Yes, Victoria said, impatient. He is wandering the streets. He thinks he is a billionaire. He is sick. Here is the doctor's report. She pushed the folder forward. The sergeant opened it. He looked at the signature. He looked at the diagnosis. Then he looked up at Victoria. Ma'am, you might want to take a seat. Why? Victoria demanded. We are wasting time. He could hurt someone. Take a seat, the sergeant repeated, his voice harder. The captain wants to speak with you. Victoria sat down on a wooden bench, confused but confident. She thought they were just being bureaucratic. She thought she had won. She sat there imagining me in a hospital gown, sedated, locked away while she redecorated my apartment. She did not know that in the captain's office I was already sitting there drinking coffee. She did not know that the captain was an old friend from the days when I helped the precinct clean up a hazardous waste dump off the books. And she definitely did not know that Anika Ross had just handed the captain a USB drive containing the audio of her buying a diagnosis from Dr. Vance. The door to the captain's office opened. Victoria stood up, expecting help. Instead, 2 officers walked out. They were not smiling. They walked straight up to her. Victoria Jefferson, the lead officer, said, Yes, she said, smiling. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back. Victoria froze. What? You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, filing a false police report, and attempted kidnapping. The officers grabbed her arms. The folder fell to the floor, spilling the fake medical records across the dirty tiles. "No," Victoria screamed. "No, you do not understand. He is crazy. The doctor said so." I walked out of the office then. I stood at the top of the stairs looking down at her. I was wearing my glasses. I was clean-shaven. I looked every inch the chairman. Victoria looked up at me. Her eyes went wide. "Wallace," she whispered. I did not say a word. I just held up the piece of paper Dr. Vance had signed for me, the one that said I was perfectly sane. I tapped the paper. Then I turned around and walked back into the office. Victoria's screams echoed through the station as they handcuffed her. It was a terrible sound. But to me it sounded like justice. The trap had sprung, and the mouse was finally caught. 48 hours after being dragged out of the 19th precinct in handcuffs, Victoria was back on the street. Her father had put up his modest retirement home in New Jersey as collateral for her bail, a mistake he would soon regret most bitterly. Instead of fleeing the state or preparing a defense for her upcoming fraud trial, Victoria decided to double down. She was like a gambler who had lost every chip on the table and was now betting her life on a single spin of the wheel. She was desperate, terrified, and dangerous. I sat in the back of a surveillance van parked 3 blocks away from a nondescript coffee shop in Queens, watching the video feed from a hidden camera. Anika sat beside me, monitoring the audio. The screen showed Victoria sitting in a booth, her leg bouncing nervously. She looked haggard. The arrogance that had defined her at the wedding was gone, replaced by the frantic energy of a cornered rat. Terrence sat across from her, looking like he wanted to vomit. He had been released on his own recognizance, and it was clear he had not slept in days. They were waiting for a man named Mr. Volkov. He was not real. Of course, Mr. Volkov was actually a retired FBI agent named Miller, who now worked for Anika, his security firm. But to Victoria and Terrence, he was a cash buyer from the dark web, a man who bought distressed properties with no questions asked and paid in non-sequential bills. Victoria had listed my penthouse on a shadow real estate forum just hours after making bail. She was using a forged power of attorney document she had prepared weeks ago, claiming I was incapacitated, and she was the legal guardian authorized to liquidate assets. She was asking for $2 million cash. A fraction of what the property was worth, but enough to get them to a non-extradition country and set them up for a few years. I watched as Miller walked into the coffee shop. He was a large man wearing a thick wool coat and carrying a metal briefcase. He looked the part of a man who laundered money for a living. He spotted them and slid into the booth without shaking hands. "You are the sellers?" Miller asked, his Russian accent thick and convincing. "Yes," Victoria said, leaning forward. Her eyes were glued to the briefcase. "Do you have the money?" Miller tapped the case with a thick finger. $2 million American dollars as agreed. But first, I need to see the papers. I do not do business with ghosts." Victoria pulled a manila envelope from her bag. Her hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. She slid the documents across the scratched table. "Here," she said. "It is all here. The deed, the power of attorney signed by Wallace Jefferson. The transfer forms. I have already notarized them." Miller picked up the documents, pretending to scrutinize them. I knew the notary stamp was fake, stolen from an online template. I knew the signature was a forgery traced from an old birthday card I had sent Terrence years ago. It was a clumsy crime, but crimes do not have to be perfect to be devastating. They just have to be accepted, this power of attorney. Miller said, narrowing his eyes. "It says the owner is mentally incompetent. Is he likely to cause trouble? Is he going to show up looking for his house?" Victoria let out a harsh laugh. "He is a vegetable," she lied effortlessly. "He is in a state facility. He does not even know his own name anymore. He will be dead within the year." I felt a flash of anger, but I pushed it down. This was evidence. This was the final nail in the coffin. Miller nodded slowly. "Good. I like clean breaks. And the son," he pointed at Terrence. "You are the heir. Do you agree to this sale?" Terrence flinched. He looked at the papers, then at Victoria, then at the briefcase. He stammered. "I do not know. Victoria, maybe we should not do this. This is the house I grew up in. Dad is not a vegetable. He is going to find out." Victoria turned on him with the speed of a viper. The crack of her hand against his face echoed through the audio feed. It was a slap, reminiscent of the one she had given me, but filled with even more venom. "Shut up," she hissed, grabbing his face and forcing him to look at her. You spineless coward. We have no choice. Do you want to go to prison? Do you want to be poor for the rest of your life? We need this money. We are leaving tonight. Now sign the damn papers. Terrence held his cheek, tears welling in his eyes. He looked at his wife and saw no love, only survival. He was trapped in her web, and he lacked the strength to cut his way out. With a trembling hand, Terrence picked up the pen. He looked at the document. The line for the seller's signature waited for him. By signing, he was not just selling a building, he was selling his soul. He was committing grand larceny and real estate fraud. Just sign it, Victoria urged, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Do it for us, Terrence. Do it for our future. Terrence lowered the pen to the paper. I watched the tip touch the page. He scribbled his name. It was done. Miller took the papers back and nodded. He spun the briefcase around and clicked the latches open. The lid lifted, revealing stacks of $100 bills tightly bound. It was an impressive sight, even for me. Victoria gasped. Her eyes widened, reflecting the green glow of the cash. She reached out her fingers, twitching with greed. Can I count it? She asked. Be my guest, Miller said, leaning back. Victoria plunged her hands into the money. She did not count it. She caressed it. She grabbed a bundle and held it to her chest. Closing her eyes, she looked like a starving person, finally sitting down to a feast. This is it, she whispered to Terrence. It is over. We won. We are rich. She began shoving the bundles of cash into her large tote bag, frantically trying to hide the evidence of her crime. Terrence just stared at the table, unable to look at the money or his wife. I tapped Anika on the shoulder. It is time, I said. We exited the van and walked briskly toward the coffee shop. 2 uniformed police officers fell in step behind us, but I signaled them to wait by the door. I wanted to handle the entrance myself. Inside the coffee shop, the air was thick with the smell of roasted beans and deceit. Victoria had just zipped up her bag. She was sliding out of the booth, a triumphant smile on her face. Miller was sipping an espresso, looking bored. Victoria stood up, clutching the bag to her chest. She took 1 step toward the door, and then she froze. I was standing in the doorway, blocking the exit. I was wearing a long cashmere coat and leather gloves, looking every inch the landlord she claimed was a vegetable. Hello, Victoria, I said, my voice calm and pleasant. Going somewhere? Victoria screamed. It was a short, sharp sound of pure terror. She stumbled back, knocking into the table. The bag of money fell from her shoulder and hit the floor with a heavy thud. Bundles of cash spilled out, scattering across the dirty tiles like dead leaves. Wallace, she gasped. You are supposed to be in a facility, I finished, forgetting my own name. I believe that is what you told your buyer. I walked into the room, stepping on a stack of bills. Terrence looked up at me. His face was pale, his eyes dead. He did not look surprised, only resigned. Dad, he whispered. I ignored him. I looked at Victoria, who was backing away until she hit the counter. I have to say, Victoria, I said, picking up the forged power of attorney from the table. Your forgery skills have improved. The signature looks almost authentic. Shame about the notary stamp, though. That notary died 3 years ago. You really should check your references. Victoria looked around wildly, looking for an escape route. There was none. The police officers stepped into the doorway, their hands on their belts. It was a trap, she hissed, realizing finally that she had not been the hunter but the prey. You set us up. I did. I agreed. And you walked right into it. You just sold a property you do not own, using a forged document to an undercover agent in exchange for marked bills. That is grand larceny, fraud, and forgery. All Class B felonies. You are looking at 15 to 20 years, Victoria. No, she shouted, grabbing Terrence by the lapels. Tell him, Terrence! Tell him you made me do it! Tell him it was your idea! Terrence looked at her. He looked at the woman who had slapped him, who had insulted his father, who had ruined his life, and for the first time in his life he found a tiny shard of a backbone. He pushed her hands away. Stop it, Victoria, he said, his voice tired. It is over. I am not lying for you anymore. Victoria stared at him, betrayed by her own pawn. She turned back to me, her eyes filling with hate. You think you have won? She spat. You think because you have money you can control everything. You are just a lonely old man. You will die alone. I smiled. It was a cold smile, a smile that did not reach my eyes. Maybe I said, but I will die in my own house, sleeping in my own bed. And you, Victoria, you will die in a cage." I nodded to the officers. They moved in. Victoria screamed and fought, kicking and scratching as they handcuffed her. Terrence surrendered, quietly holding his hands out as if he welcomed the chains. As they dragged Victoria past me, she lunged, trying to bite me, screaming obscenities. The customers in the coffee shop watched in stunned silence, phone cameras recording every second. "Wait," I said to the officers. They paused, holding the thrashing woman. I reached into the bag on the floor and pulled out a single bundle of cash. I held it up in front of Victoria's face. "You wanted the money," I said softly. I tucked the bundle into the pocket of her coat. "Here, keep it. You will need something to buy snacks at the commissary." Victoria screamed a sound of pure, impotent rage as they hauled her out the door. The siren wailed outside, a mournful sound that marked the end of her freedom. I looked at Miller, who was calmly packing the rest of the money back into the briefcase. "Good work, Miller," I said. "Pleasure, sir," he replied. I looked at the empty booth where my son had just sold me out. I looked at the forged papers on the table. I felt a deep, profound sadness, but beneath it, a bedrock of resolve. They had tried to take my home. They had tried to take my dignity, but all they had taken was a one-way ticket to oblivion. I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving the scattered money and the shattered lives behind me. The air outside was cold, but it felt clean. The sale was fake, but the justice was very, very real. The coffee shop was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the heavy breathing of a woman who knew her life was over. The police officers stood by the door, their hands hovering near their belts, waiting for the signal to take her into custody. Terrence sat in the booth, his head in his hands, a broken man who had finally realized the cost of his weakness. But Victoria was not broken yet. She was cornered, and like any dangerous animal, she decided to bite. She reached into her coat pocket. The officers tensed, perhaps expecting a weapon. Instead, she pulled out her smartphone. Her thumb moved across the screen with the frantic speed of desperation. She wasn't calling a lawyer. She wasn't calling her parents. She was calling her army. She opened the live stream app. She held the phone up high, angling it so the light hit the tears that had already started to stream down her face. "Help me!" she screamed at the screen, her voice cracking perfectly. "Please, someone help me." I watched from a few feet away, fascinated by her commitment to the lie. In a matter of seconds, the viewer count on her screen began to tick upward. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. Her previous viral video had given her a massive audience, and they were all getting the notification that the grieving bride was live. "Guys, they set me up," she sobbed into the camera. "My father-in-law, he is a monster. He hired people to entrap us. He is trying to send us to jail because we wanted to be independent. Look at them." She spun the camera around, pointing it at me, then at Anika, then at the police officers. "He brought the police. He is using his money to buy the law. He wants to lock us up so he can keep all his millions to himself. We just wanted to sell our own property to survive, and he turned it into a crime scene." The comments on the screen were flying by so fast they were a blur. "Run, Victoria. This is abuse. We are recording this. Leave her alone, you old tyrant." She was winning. Even here, standing over a bag of illicit cash with forged documents on the table, she was winning the narrative. She was the victim, the poor girl fighting the billionaire establishment. Annika stepped forward, her face stern. Ms. Jefferson put the phone down. "You are under arrest." "No!" Victoria shrieked, backing away until she hit the counter. "I am not putting it down. The world needs to see this. You are corrupt. You are all corrupt." She looked directly into the lens, her eyes wide and pleading. "He is trying to say I forged papers. He is trying to say I stole. But it is a lie. I have the power of attorney. He signed it. He is just trying to gaslight everyone because he is sick. He is sick, and he is cruel, and he needs to be stopped." I sighed. It was a deep, weary sigh. I had hoped it wouldn't come to this. I had hoped the shame of the arrest would be enough. But Victoria had no shame. She only had survival instincts and a data plan. I walked toward her. "Stay away from me," she yelled, pointing the phone at my face. "Do not touch me. Everyone look. He is coming for me." I did not touch her. I stopped 2 feet away, well within the frame of her video. I looked directly into the camera lens. I saw my own reflection in the glass, calm, composed, and ready. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice steady and low. Victoria tried to talk over me. See, see how cold he is. He is a psychopath. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own phone. I did not turn on the camera. I opened an audio file. It was the recording Anika had given me, the one captured by the bug in Dr. Vance's office, the one evidence that would turn her digital army into a firing squad. "Victoria," I said, "before you continue your story, I think your friends should hear something." What, she snapped, momentarily confused. I pressed play. I turned the volume up to the maximum. The sound was crystal clear. It cut through the coffee shop air and fed directly into her live stream microphone. "Dr. Vance, I do not care about the tests." It was Victoria's voice. There was no mistaking it. It was sharp, impatient, and cruel. "He is an old man. Nobody cares about him. Just inject him with something." Victoria went pale. She tried to lower her phone, but her arm seemed frozen. The recording continued. "Inject him with something to make him lose his mind completely. Make him drool. Make him forget his name. I do not care if it is permanent. In fact, it is better if it is permanent." "No," Victoria whispered. "I will pay you an extra $50,000, doctor. Just make sure he never wakes up from the fog. I need that power of attorney, and I cannot have him fighting me. Turn him into a vegetable, and the money is yours." The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I looked at Victoria's phone screen. The stream of hearts and supportive emojis had stopped. The comments had frozen for a split second, as if the internet itself was taking a breath. And then the tide turned. It was not a wave. It was a tsunami. OMFG, did she just say that, murderer? She tried to lobotomize him. I hope you rot in jail. Inject him. She is a demon. Unfollowing. Calling the FBI. The viewer count jumped from 50,000 to 100,000 in seconds, but now they weren't watching a victim. They were watching a villain. I looked at Victoria. She was staring at the screen, reading the hate that was pouring in. Her hands started to shake. The color drained from her face until she looked like a wax doll. That is fake," she stammered, looking at the camera. "He used AI. He faked my voice." But no one was buying it. The desperation in her voice on the recording was too real. The malice was too specific. "You wanted an audience, Victoria," I said softly. "Now you have one. You wanted them to know the truth about our family. Well, now they know. They know you were not trying to save me. You were trying to erase me." Victoria looked at me. The realization of what had just happened crashed down on her. She hadn't just lost the money. She hadn't just lost the house. She had lost her mask. The world saw her naked, ugly soul. She let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a guttural scream of pure, unadulterated rage. "You ruined everything," she shrieked. She smashed her phone onto the tiled floor. The screen shattered, ending the live stream, but the video was already out there. It was already being screen recorded, shared, and reposted. It was eternal. She did not stop there. She lunged at me. Her fingers curled into claws, aiming for my eyes. She moved with the speed of a woman who had nothing left to lose. "I will kill you," she screamed. "I will kill you myself." I did not move. I did not have to. Before she could get within striking distance, a wall of muscle interposed itself between us. Annika's lead bodyguard, a man who moved faster than his size should allow, caught Victoria by the wrists. He did not hurt her. He simply stopped her. He held her arms in a grip of iron, keeping her immobilized while she thrashed and kicked and spat. "Let me go. Let me kill him." The two police officers stepped forward then. They had seen enough. The assault on a federal witness, the public confession, the attempt to incite violence, it was all over. They took her from the bodyguard. They spun her around and slammed her against the counter. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest music I had heard all day. Victoria Jefferson, the officer, said, his voice bored but firm. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and assault. You have the right to remain silent." Victoria was sobbing now, her face pressed against the cold laminate of the coffee counter. "Terrence," she wailed. "Terrence, help me. Do not let them take me." I looked at my son. He was still sitting in the booth. He hadn't moved. He hadn't looked up. He was staring at the forged documents on the table as if they were written in a foreign language. He did not help her. He did not even look at her. The officers hauled Victoria up. She was limp now, her energy spent. They dragged her toward the door. As she passed me, she looked up. Her eyes were red swollen and filled with hate. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know I said, but you hate yourself more." They took her out to the squad car. The red and blue lights flashed against the window of the coffee shop, illuminating the scene of the crime. I turned to Anika. "Is the video secured?" "Yes, sir," Anika said. "We have a copy. The police have a copy. And judging by Twitter, half of America has a copy." "Good," I said. I looked at Terrence. The officers were walking toward him now. "Stand up, son," I said. Terrence stood up slowly. He held out his hands. He did not fight. He did not scream. He looked at me with eyes that were empty of everything except resignation. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered. I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had raised, the boy I had protected, the boy I had loved, and I saw the man who had signed his name next to the order to sell my home. "I am sorry too," I said. The officers handcuffed him and led him away. I stood alone in the coffee shop. The barista was staring at me from behind the espresso machine, his mouth open. I walked over to the counter. I pulled out a $100 bill and placed it in the tip jar. "Sorry for the disturbance," I said. I walked out into the night. The air was cold, but it felt clean. The live stream was over. The trial was about to begin, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one who was afraid. The law is a slow beast, and sometimes it moves too slowly to catch a viper before it strikes again. Victoria Jefferson spent exactly 4 hours in a holding cell. Her father, a man whose retirement savings were about to be incinerated, posted her bail. He mortgaged his small house in New Jersey to free a daughter who would sell him for a designer handbag if the price were right. The police had to let her go. The evidence regarding the forgery was strong, but the digital forensics on the audio recording would take days to officially verify. In the eyes of the court, she was not yet a convict. She was just a woman with a very good lawyer and a very terrified husband. I watched the security feed from the precinct exterior. My stomach turned as I saw her walk out. She did not look humbled. She did not look afraid. She looked furious. Her makeup was smeared and her expensive coat was wrinkled, but her stride was aggressive. She grabbed Terrence by the arm, digging her nails into his bicep, and dragged him toward a waiting Uber. They did not go to the airport. They did not go to a lawyer. They went to the one place Terrence had spent his entire childhood trying to forget. They went to the Bronx. They went to the yard. My sanitation yard covers 3 city blocks in the industrial district. It is a noisy, dirty place filled with the smell of diesel and the grinding of metal. It is where the garbage trucks sleep. It is where the recycling is sorted. It is the beating heart of my empire, and Terrence hated it. He grew up embarrassed by the smell on my clothes. He told his friends at private school that his father was in logistics. He never said the word trash. I switched the feed on my tablet to the cameras at the yard. The facility was closed for the night. The gates were locked. The security guards were on patrol, but the perimeter is large, and if you know where the fence is loose, you can slip inside. Terrence knew. He had snuck out that way a dozen times as a teenager to go party with his friends. Watch them crawl through the gap in the chain-link fence. Victoria ruined her coat on a rusted wire and she kicked the fence in frustration. They moved through the shadows, dodging the floodlights toward the main office. It was a small brick building in the center of the yard. It looked like nothing, a shack surrounded by mountains of compressed plastic and metal. "Why are we here?" Terrence asked, his voice picked up by the external microphones. "We should be running, Victoria. The police are going to come for us." The audio recording was real. He knows everything. "Shut up," Victoria hissed. She was shining her phone flashlight around, scanning the yard. "This is where he keeps it." "Keeps what?" "The money," she snapped. "The real money. You heard that lawyer, Anika Ross. She called him chairman. She said he owns buildings. That old man does not use banks for everything. People like him hoard cash. He probably has a safe full of it right here in this dump. We find the cash. We steal a car and we disappear." She smashed the glass of the office door with a brick. The alarm did not sound. I had disabled it remotely 10 seconds earlier. I wanted them to go in. I wanted them to see. I wanted my son to understand exactly what he had thrown away. They stepped into my office. It has not changed much in 30 years. A metal desk, a filing cabinet, a calendar from 1999 on the wall. It smells of old coffee and hard work. Victoria swept the papers off my desk looking for a safe. She pulled the drawers open, dumping pens and staplers onto the floor. "Where is it?" she screamed. "Where is the money?" "There is no money, Victoria," Terrence said, leaning against the doorframe, looking ready to pass out. "He is a garbage man." The lawyer was probably lying to scare us. Victoria ignored him. She turned to the large gray filing cabinet in the corner. It was locked. She picked up a heavy letter opener from the floor and jammed it into the lock, prying it open with a grunt of exertion. The metal popped and the drawer slid open. It was not full of cash. It was full of leather-bound ledgers and thick legal folders. Victoria pulled one out randomly. It was a deed. She opened it and shone her light on the pages. "What is this?" she whispered. She pulled out another folder, then another. She started reading. Her eyes moved faster and faster, scanning the lines of text. The anger on her face began to fade, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. "Terrence," she said, her voice trembling. "Look at this." Terrence walked over. He looked at the document in her hand. "It is a deed," he said. "So what?" "Read the address," Victoria said. Terrence read it. 155 Industrial Way. "That is this place." "Keep reading," Victoria said, pulling out a ledger. "Look at the revenue." Terrence looked at the column of numbers. His eyes went wide. "This says $12 million, he whispered. "That cannot be right. That is the annual revenue." "No," Victoria said, flipping the page. "That is the quarterly revenue. Terrence, your father does not just work here. He owns it. He owns Jefferson Sanitation. He owns the recycling plant next door. He owns the land under the industrial park." She dropped the ledger and grabbed a blue folder. "This is a contract with the city," she said, breathless. "It is a 10-year exclusive contract for waste management in 3 boroughs. Do you know what this is worth? Terrence, this is a government contract. It is worth millions." She kept digging. She found the deeds to the apartment blocks in Harlem. She found the purchase order for the land in Brooklyn where the penthouse stood. She found the tax returns I had filed, perfectly legal and astronomically high. "My God," Terrence whispered, backing away. "He is not just rich. He is an empire," Victoria finished. She was not screaming anymore. She was standing in the middle of the scattered papers, holding a balance sheet that showed a net worth of over $50 million. She looked around the dirty office differently now. She did not see a shack. She saw the throne room of a king she had tried to dethrone with a slap. $50 million, she whispered. The number hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. It was more money than she had ever imagined. It was not just fuck you money. It was change the world money. I watched her face closely on the monitor. I expected fear. I expected her to realize that she had attacked a man with infinite resources and run for the hills. I expected her to grab Terrence and flee the country before I crushed them. But I had underestimated the depth of her sickness. The fear in her eyes vanished. It was replaced by something much darker, something cold and sharp and terrifying. It was the look of a predator who has just realized the prey is much fatter than they thought. "We cannot leave," she said softly. "What?" Terrence asked, looking at the door. "We have to go. Victoria. The police." "No," Victoria said. She dropped the papers and walked over to Terrence. She grabbed his face in her hands. Her touch was not gentle, it was possessing. "Do you not see?" she said, her voice intense, vibrating with a new energy. "We were fighting for scraps. We were trying to steal a single apartment. We were trying to get a few $1,000s from his wallet. We were thinking so small." "Victoria, he is going to put us in jail," Terrence cried. "He has the recording. He has a recording of me being angry," Victoria said, dismissing it. "He has a recording of a stressed-out bride venting. We can fight that. But this," she gestured to the room. "This is $50 million, Terrence. If we run, we are fugitives. We are poor. We are nothing. But if we stay, we go to prison," Terrence shouted. "Not if he dies," Victoria said. The words were spoken so casually they took a moment to register. Terrence froze. He looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "What did you say?" he whispered. "He is old," Victoria said. She began to pace the small office, her heels crunching on the broken glass. She was manic, energized by the revelation of my wealth. "He is 68. He has high blood pressure. He works in a dangerous industry. People his age die all the time. Heart attacks, strokes, falls." "Victoria." "Stop it," Terrence said, backing away. "You are talking about murder. I am talking about inheritance," she snapped. She cornered him against the desk. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with a fanatical light. Think about it, Terrence. You are his only son, his only heir. If he dies without a will, or if we find the will and it is favorable, you get everything. You get the company, you get the buildings, you get the contracts. $50 million, Terrence. We could be kings of New York. But he hates us, Terrence said. He cut us off. He is angry, Victoria corrected. But he is your father. And fathers forgive. That is their weakness. He let you steal from him for years and did nothing. Why? Because he loves you. He wants to save you. She ran her hand down his chest. We have to go back, she said. Go back where? To him. To the house. We have to go back and beg. We have to crawl. We have to apologize. We have to tell him we were wrong, that we were stressed, that the wedding made us crazy. We have to get back into his life. He will never let us in. He will, Victoria said, confident. He is a lonely old man. He wants his family. We just have to give him the performance of a lifetime. We will cry. We will plead. We will tell him I am pregnant again. We will do whatever it takes to get back inside that house. And then, Terrence asked, his voice barely a whisper. And then we wait, Victoria said. She looked at the surveillance camera in the corner of the room almost as if she knew I was watching. She smiled a smile that made my blood run cold. Your father is too rich to stay alive. Terrence, he is a walking lottery ticket, and I am not throwing away the winning numbers. We go back, we make peace, and then we find a way to make nature take its course faster. She grabbed her coat and buttoned it, covering the expensive dress. Come on, she said. Let us go get some rest. We need to look humble tomorrow. We need to look like children who have learned their lesson. She took Terrence's hand. He hesitated for a second, looking at the papers on the floor, the proof of my labor and his inheritance. Then he looked at Victoria. He looked at the greed in her eyes. And God help me. He nodded. Okay, he whispered. Okay. They walked out of the office, leaving the broken glass and the scattered secrets behind them. They climbed back through the fence and disappeared into the night. I sat in the control room miles away, staring at the static screen. I felt a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with age. It was the weight of a final terrible realization. My son was not just weak, he was broken, and the woman he married was not just a gold digger. She was a shark who had just smelled blood in the water. I picked up the phone. Annika answered on the first ring, even though it was 3 a.m. Yes, sir. They are not running, I said. My voice was steady, but my hand gripped the phone tight enough to crack the screen. They are coming back to apologize, she asked. To kill me, I said. There was a silence on the line. Shall I send the team to intercept them? Annika asked. No, I said. I looked at the image of the empty office. The papers were still on the floor. I thought about the $50 million. I thought about the years of sweat and sacrifice. And I thought about the look in Victoria's eyes. Let them come, I said. Let them come back. Let them think they have fooled me. Let them think I am the lonely old man who wants his family back. Sir, that is dangerous, Annika warned. I know, I said. But I need them to make a move. I need them to do something that a jury cannot ignore. I need them to try, Annika, because when they try, I am going to be ready. And when the trap snaps shut this time, it is not going to be for fraud. It is going to be for life. I hung up the phone. I turned off the monitors. I sat in the dark listening to the hum of the city. My empire was made of trash, but I had built it with iron will. My family thought I was the prey. They were about to find out that the old garbage man knew exactly how to dispose of toxic waste. The rain in New York does not wash things clean. It just makes the dirt slicker and harder to navigate. I stood by the window of my penthouse looking down at the street below. It was pouring a relentless cold sheet of water that turned the city gray, but even through the downpour I could see them. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, illuminating the stage my daughter-in-law had set for her final performance. Victoria was kneeling on the sidewalk, right in front of the lobby entrance. She was wearing a thin coat soaked through to the skin. Her hair was plastered to her skull, streaming water like a broken gutter. But the centerpiece of her display was her midsection. Underneath her wet dress, there was a distinct bulge. A bump. A baby bump. It was a fake. Of course, I knew it was fake. I had seen her medical records. I knew she had an IUD. I knew she was about as pregnant as I was, but the neighbors did not know that. The passers-by, sheltering under their umbrellas, did not know that. All they saw was a pregnant woman on her knees in the freezing rain begging for forgiveness while her husband stood over her holding a broken umbrella trying to shield her from the storm. It had been 4 hours, 4 hours of theater. She was wailing loud enough to be heard over the traffic. She was screaming my name. She was screaming for mercy. She was screaming for the sake of the grandchild she claimed to be carrying. I watched the security feed on my tablet. The cameras in the lobby showed the doorman looking uncomfortable. Residents were coming in and out, casting judgmental glances up toward my floor. The narrative was shifting again. I was not the victim anymore. I was the cruel old miser leaving a pregnant woman to freeze on the street. My phone rang. It was the front desk. Mr. Jefferson, the concierge, said, his voice tight. "Sir, we have a situation. The neighbors are gathering. Mrs. Higgins from 4B is down there. She is threatening to call the press again. She says it is inhumane." I sighed. I looked at the screen. Mrs. Higgins was a widow with too much time and a heart that bled for anyone with a sob story. She was wrapping a blanket around Victoria, shoulders glaring up at my window. "Let them up," I said. "Sir?" the concierge asked, surprised. "Let them up," I repeated. "Send them to the penthouse." I hung up and walked to the door. I unlocked it. I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway and waited. I was not letting them in because I was soft. I was letting them in because the game had to end. And to catch a rat, sometimes you have to let it into the pantry. 5 minutes later, the elevator dinged. The doors slid open. Victoria stumbled out, leaning heavily on Terrence. She looked pathetic. She was shivering violently, her lips blue, her skin pale. But her eyes, when they met mine, were not the eyes of a broken woman. They were the eyes of a soldier who had just breached the enemy walls. "Dad," Terrence croaked. He looked exhausted, wet, and miserable. He looked like a man who had lost his soul and was just waiting for his body to catch up. "Dad, please. She is freezing. She is going to get sick. The baby." I looked at Victoria's stomach. It was a good prop, high-quality silicone, probably. Strapped on tight. I wondered where she had stolen it or what money she had used to buy it instead of food. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They walked past me, leaving a trail of dirty water on my hardwood floors. The smell of wet wool and desperation filled the air. I pointed to the guest bathroom. "There are towels in there. Dry off. I do not want you dripping on my rugs." Victoria nodded her head, bowed. "Thank you, Wallace. Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was raspy. "I am so sorry. We are so sorry. We just had nowhere else to go." I did not answer. I went into the kitchen and turned on the kettle. I needed tea. I needed something hot to wash away the cold feeling in my gut. They emerged 20 minutes later wearing dry clothes. I kept in the guest room for emergencies. Victoria was wearing an oversized sweater that accentuated the fake bump. She sat on the edge of the sofa, rubbing her hands together. I sat in the armchair across from them. My face was stone, so I said, "You are pregnant." Victoria looked up, her eyes filled with fresh tears. "Yes," she said. "I found out 2 days ago. That is why we came back. That is why we were so desperate, Wallace. I know we messed up. I know we did terrible things. But this is your grandchild. This is a fresh start." She placed a hand on the bulge protectively. Was a nice touch. A touch designed to trigger a biological instinct in me to make me protect the lineage. "And you?" "Terrence," I asked, looking at my son. "Is this your fresh start too?" Terrence looked at the floor. I want to believe him. I want to believe he was just a fool. But I remembered the ledger in the office. I remembered his signature on the sale documents. "I just want us to be a family again, Dad," he whispered. "I am tired of fighting." I leaned back. I looked at them both. The pregnant mother, the repentant son. It was a perfect picture, a Trojan horse made of flesh and lies. "You can stay," I said. Victoria let out a sob of relief. Terrence slumped his shoulders as if a physical weight had been removed, but I continued raising a finger. "Only for tonight. This is a temporary shelter, not a home. Tomorrow we call the lawyers. We figure out a payment plan for what you stole. We figure out custody arrangements if there is a child. And we figure out if I am going to press charges." Victoria nodded, eagerly. "Anything," she said. "We will do anything. Just let us stay. Let us prove to you we have changed." I stood up. The guest room is down the hall. Do not go into the master bedroom. Do not go into my office. There are cameras in the hallway. If you touch anything valuable, the police will be here in 3 minutes. I walked to my bedroom and closed the door, but I did not go to sleep. I went to my desk where a bank of monitors was set up. Anika's team had installed hidden cameras and microphones in every room of the apartment 2 days ago, anticipating exactly this move. I watched them on the screen. They were in the living room. They were not hugging. They were not celebrating. They were whispering. "Did he buy it?" Terrence asked, his voice barely audible. "He let us in, didn't he?" Victoria replied. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was hard-focused. She pulled up her sweater and adjusted the straps of the fake belly. It was itching her. "We have to do it tonight," she whispered. "Tonight," Terrence hissed. "You crazy! He just let us in. If he dies tonight, the police will know. If he dies in a week, they will know too," Victoria snapped. "But if he dies tonight, we are in the house. We can find the will. We can destroy it. We can find the cash. He is old, Terrence. His heart is weak." "That is what the doctor said, right? High blood pressure." "But how?" Terrence asked. Victoria reached into her bag, the one she had guarded so carefully even in the rain. She pulled out a small glass vial. It was unmarked. The liquid inside was clear. "Digoxin," she said. "I stole it from my mother's medicine cabinet. She takes it for her arrhythmia. In small doses, it helps the heartbeat. In a high dose, it stops it. It looks like a heart attack. No foam at the mouth, no convulsions, just a sudden massive failure. The coroner will see a 68-year-old man with a history of hypertension. He won't even run a tox screen." Terrence stared at the vial. He looked terrified, but he didn't stop her. "How are you going to give it to him?" "Warm milk," Victoria said, smiling. "A classic. He always drinks warm milk before bed, doesn't he?" "You told me that?" "Yeah," Terrence said. "He does." "Then go check if he is asleep," Victoria ordered. "I will prepare the nightcap." I watched on the monitor as my son walked down the hallway. He stopped outside my door. He listened. I made sure to breathe heavily to make the bed springs creak as if I were tossing and turning. He stood there for a long minute, his hand hovering over the knob, then he turned and walked back. "He is awake," he whispered to Victoria. "Good," she said. She walked into the kitchen. I switched the camera feed to the kitchen. I watched her open the refrigerator. She took out the carton of milk. She poured it into a small saucepan. She put it on the stove. She moved with the precision of an assassin. She watched the milk heat up, stirring it gently. She didn't look crazy. She looked efficient. She looked like she was cooking dinner, not murder. When the milk was steaming, she turned off the heat. She poured it into a mug. My favorite mug. The one that said, "World is best dad." A gift from Terrence when he was 10 years old. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. She took the vial from her pocket. She unscrewed the cap. She didn't measure it. She poured the entire contents into the mug. She stirred it. The clear liquid vanished into the white milk. Colorless, odorless, tasteless. Death. She picked up the mug. She blew on it to cool it down. Then she walked out of the kitchen. I moved away from the monitors. I sat in my armchair facing the door. I turned on the reading lamp, casting a warm glow over the room. I picked up a book. I didn't read it. I just held it waiting. A gentle knock on the door. "Come in," I said. The door opened. Victoria stood there holding the mug. She had taken off the sweater. She was wearing a loose t-shirt. The fake belly was hidden, but the threat was right there in her hands. "Hi, Wallace," she said softly. "I saw your light was on. I couldn't sleep. I wanted to thank you again for saving us." She walked into the room. She smelled of soap and treachery. "I made you something," she said, holding out the mug. "Warm milk." Terrence said, "It helps you sleep." I looked at the mug. I looked at her face. She was smiling, a sweet, concerned daughter-in-law smile. "Thank you, Victoria," I said. I reached out and took the mug. It was warm in my hands. I could smell the milk. The steam rose up, carrying the scent of dairy and death. She stood there watching me. She didn't leave. She clasped her hands in front of her, waiting. "Aren't you going to drink it?" she asked. Her voice was casual, but her eyes were intense, laser-focused on the rim of the mug. In a minute, I said, "I want it to cool down a bit." I placed the mug on the coaster beside me. I looked at her. "You should get some rest, Victoria. You are pregnant. You need your strength." She hesitated. She didn't want to leave. She wanted to see me drink it. She wanted to see me fall. but she couldn't push too hard. She had to play the part. "You are right," she said. "I am exhausted. Good night. Wallace, sleep well." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door cracked open just an inch. I waited. I knew she was there. I knew she was standing in the hallway, peering through the crack, holding her breath, waiting for the sound of my body hitting the floor. I picked up the mug. The ceramic was hot against my skin. I lifted it slowly, deliberately. I brought it to my lips. I tilted my head back. From the hallway, Victoria watched. Her heart was pounding in her chest. She saw the old man, the obstacle, the tyrant lift the poison. She saw him tilt the cup. She saw his throat move. She smiled in the darkness. It was done. The empire was hers. The money was hers. The old man was gone. She didn't know that I hadn't taken a sip. She didn't know that. Inside the room, I was staring at the liquid, knowing exactly what it was. She didn't know that the trap had just snapped shut and she was already dead. She just hadn't stopped breathing yet. I lowered the mug. I let out a satisfied sigh loud enough for her to hear. Then I dropped the book on the floor, creating a heavy thud. I heard her footsteps retreat quickly down the hall. She was going to tell Terrence. She was going to celebrate. I stood up. I poured the milk into a specimen jar I had prepared earlier, sealing it tight. Evidence. Then I picked up my phone and texted Annika 3 words. It is time I lay down on the floor. I closed my eyes. I slowed my breathing. I prepared to play the role of a lifetime. Because tomorrow morning, when they came to find my body, they were going to find a resurrection instead. The ceramic mug shattered against the hardwood floor with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. White milk splattered across my boots and soaked into the expensive Persian rug. I had timed it perfectly. Just as the rim touched my lip, I let my hand spasm violently, feigning the onset of a tremor. The mug slipped from my fingers and crashed. I sat back in the armchair, breathing heavily, acting the part of a startled old man. I waited for them to come running. I expected the door to burst open. I expected Victoria to rush in to check if her lethal cocktail had been ingested. But the hallway remained silent. They were waiting. They were listening. They wanted to be sure the deed was done before they entered the room to play the grieving survivors. I looked down at the mess on the floor. The milk was spreading a white pool of death. And then my heart stopped for real. Not from poison, but from horror. From under the sofa, my old cat Barnaby crawled out. He was a stray I had rescued from the sanitation yard 10 years ago, a tough old tomcat with 1 torn ear and a heart of gold. He was my only companion in this big, empty apartment. He smelled the milk. Before I could move, before I could make a sound to warn him, he lowered his head and lapped up the white liquid. "No," I whispered. The word caught in my throat. I could not shout. If I shouted, they would know I was awake. They would know I was aware. Barnaby took 2 licks. 3. Then he stopped. He looked up at me, his green eyes wide and confused. He let out a low, guttural yowl that made my skin crawl. His body went rigid. His legs kicked out once, twice, scraping against the floorboards. Then he convulsed violently and fell onto his side. I watched in agonizing silence as my friend died. It took less than 10 seconds. One moment he was a living, breathing creature, and the next he was a heap of fur amidst the poisoned milk. The digoxin was potent. It was fast. If I had drunk that mug, I would be dead already. Rage. It was not a hot fire anymore. It was a cold, black ocean drowning everything else. They had killed Barnaby, an innocent animal, collateral damage in their war for my money. I looked at the door. I knew what I had to do. I had to finish the performance. I had to give them the show they paid for with their souls. I slid out of the armchair and collapsed onto the floor next to Barnaby. I lay on my side, my arm outstretched. I started to make sounds, gasping, choking, the sounds of a man whose heart is failing. "Help," I groaned, my voice raspy and weak. "Terrence." The door creaked open. I half closed my eyes, peering through my lashes. I saw 2 shadows stretch across the floor. Victoria and Terrence stood in the doorway. They looked down at me. They looked at the shattered mug. They looked at the dead cat. "Oh, God," Terrence whispered. His voice was trembling. "Dad." He took a step forward, his hand reaching for his pocket where he kept his phone. "He is having a heart attack," Terrence said, panic rising in his throat. "We have to call 911. "He is dying, Victoria. Look at him." I let out a long, shuddering breath, clutching my chest. I rolled my eyes back slightly, focusing on a point on the ceiling. I saw Victoria's shoes enter my field of vision. She walked over to me. She did not kneel. She did not check my pulse. She kicked Barnaby's small body aside with the toe of her boot. "Stop," she said. Her voice was ice. Terrence froze. "What?" "Do not call 911, Victoria ordered. "But he is dying," Terrence cried. "Look at the cat, the milk. It worked too fast. We have to save him." "No," Victoria said. She turned to face her husband. Her face was illuminated by the hallway light, and it was a mask of utter ruthlessness. "We do not save him. This is what we wanted. This is what we needed." She walked over to Terrence and grabbed his wrist, pulling his hand away from his pocket. "Think, Terrence," she hissed. "If you call an ambulance, they might save him. And if he wakes up, he will know. He will figure it out, and then we go to jail. For life. Is that what you want? Do you want to rot in a cell?" Terrence looked at me. I let out another groan, a sound of pure agony. I reached my hand out toward him, my fingers trembling. "Son," I whispered. "Help!" Terrence's face crumpled. He was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. He looked at his dying father. He looked at his pregnant wife. He looked at the future he had destroyed. "I cannot do this," he sobbed. "I cannot watch him die." "Then do not watch," Victoria said. "Sit down." She pushed him toward the armchair I had just vacated. Terrence collapsed into it, burying his face in his hands. He sobbed like a child, a weak, pathetic sound that filled the room. Victoria did not sit. She stood over me. She watched me. She was checking her watch. "It should be over soon," she muttered to herself. "Digoxin causes ventricular fibrillation. It is quick." I lay there on the cold wood, smelling the milk and the death. I focused on my breathing. I had to make it shallow. I had to make it sound erratic. I had to mimic the Cheney-Stokes respiration, the death rattle. I had seen it enough times in my life. I knew the rhythm. I gasped. Then I held my breath for 10 seconds. Then I gasped again. "Is he dead yet?" Terrence asked from the chair, his voice muffled. "Almost," Victoria said calmly. "Just wait." She began to pace. She walked around my body as if I were a piece of furniture she was planning to replace. She looked at the bookshelves. She looked at the paintings on the walls. She was already calculating the value. She was already spending the inheritance. "He was a stubborn old man," she said, speaking to the room. "He should have just given us the money. He made us do this. It is his fault, really." I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and wrap my hands around her throat, but I stayed still. I had to wait for the end. I had to wait for the moment of total betrayal. Another minute passed. My lungs burned. It is hard work playing dead. It requires a control I did not know I possessed. Finally, I let out one last, long exhalation. I pushed all the air out of my lungs. I let my body go completely limp. I relaxed every muscle. I stared unblinkingly at a spot on the rug. Silence descended on the room. Even Terrence stopped crying to listen. Victoria walked over. She knelt down beside me. I could smell her perfume. It smelled like flowers and rot. She placed 2 fingers on my neck. I used a trick Anika had taught me. I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth hard. It does not stop the pulse, but it makes the neck muscles tense in a way that can mask a weak beat if the person checking is nervous or incompetent. And Victoria was running on adrenaline. She waited for 5 seconds. "He is gone," she said. She stood up and brushed off her knees. "It is done, Terrence. He is dead." Terrence let out a wail. "Dad!" he cried. "Oh God, Dad! Shut up!" Victoria snapped. "Stop crying. We have work to do. We have to call the police in a minute. We have to tell them we found him like this. We have to say he had chest pains earlier and we told him to go to the doctor but he refused. That is the story." "Got it." Terrence nodded, unable to speak. But first, Victoria said, her eyes gleaming in the dim light, "We need to secure the assets." She turned away from my body. She did not close my eyes. She did not cover me with a blanket. She stepped over me and walked straight to the large oak desk in the corner of the room. "Where is it?" she muttered. "Where is the will?" I watched through the slit of my eyelids. She started opening drawers. She threw papers onto the floor. She was looking for the document that would verify her victory. She found the safe behind the painting of the Brooklyn Bridge. She knew the combination. Of course she did. Terrence must have told her years ago, or maybe she watched me open it. She spun the dial. Click, click, click. The heavy door swung open. Victoria reached in. She pulled out a thick envelope. It was blue velvet. My official will. Got it, she whispered. She ripped the envelope open. She pulled out the document. She scanned it quickly under the desk lamp. I leave my entire estate, including all real property, cash assets, and business holdings, to my son Terrence Jefferson, she read aloud. She laughed. It was a sound of pure relief. It is here, Terrence. He never changed it. We get everything. $50 million. She clutched the will to her chest. We are rich, she said. We are finally rich. But wait, she paused. She looked at the document again. There is a clause here. In the event of my death, any outstanding debts owed by the beneficiary to the estate shall be deducted from the inheritance. She frowned. How much did he say you stole? 50,000. That is nothing. We can absorb that. She tossed the will onto the desk. Then she reached back into the safe. Is there cash? She asked. There has to be cash. She pulled out a black ledger. She opened it. She pulled out a stack of bearer bonds. She pulled out a velvet pouch filled with diamonds I had bought as an inflation hedge in the 90s. Jackpot, she whispered. She turned to Terrence. Get a bag, she ordered. We are taking the portable assets now. Before the coroner gets here, we hide this. We declare the rest. Terrence stood up shakily. He walked toward the desk like a zombie. Victoria. I do not think we should, he began. Just get the bag, she screamed. She turned back to the safe. She was so consumed by greed, so blinded by the gold fever that she did not hear the sound of movement behind her. She did not hear me sit up. She did not hear me wipe the milk from my chin. She did not hear the soft click of the door to the guest room opening. I stood up. My knees popped. I felt every year of my 68 years, but I felt strong. I felt like Judgment Day. I walked silently across the rug, avoiding the body of my cat. I stopped 3 feet behind her. Victoria was holding a diamond necklace up to the light. Beautiful, she murmured. I cleared my throat. It looks better on a woman with a pulse, I said. Victoria froze. She did not turn around. Her body went rigid as a statue. The necklace slipped from her fingers and fell onto the desk with a clatter. Terrence looked up from the bag he was holding. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened in a silent scream. He looked like he had seen a ghost. I took a step closer. Did you find what you were looking for, Victoria? I asked, my voice deep and resonant. She turned around slowly. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. She looked at me standing there alive, angry, and very, very real. Wallace, she whispered. But you were dead. I checked. You were dead. I smiled. It was the smile of the wolf who has finally cornered the sheep. I am a hard man to kill, Victoria, I said. And you are a very bad doctor. I clapped my hands once, sharp, loud. Bravo, I said. An excellent performance. Truly. The part where you let the cat die was a nice touch. Very villainous. The door to the guest room swung fully open. Light flooded the hallway. Anika Ross stepped out. Behind her was the district attorney for New York County. Behind him were 4 NYPD detectives, their badges shining under the lights. And behind them was a camera crew holding steady, documenting every second. Victoria looked at them. She looked at the will on the desk. She looked at the open safe. She looked at me. No, she whimpered. No, this is a trick. It is not a trick, Victoria, Anika said, stepping into the room. It is a sting, and you are the catch of the day. Victoria backed up until she hit the desk. She looked for a way out. There was none. The room was full of law and order. She looked at Terrence. Do something, she screamed. Kill him. Kill him for real. Terrence dropped the bag. He fell to his knees. He put his hands on his head. He surrendered. I looked at Victoria. It is over, I said. And then for the first time that night, I let myself feel the grief. I looked at Barnaby. I looked at my son on his knees. You killed my cat, I said, my voice breaking. You tried to kill me, and you killed the last shred of love I had for my son. I pointed at the detectives. Take them away. Get them out of my house. The detectives moved in. The handcuffs came out, the rights were read. But I was not listening. I was looking at the will on the desk. I walked over and picked it up. I held it in front of Victoria's face as the detective grabbed her arms. You should have read the whole thing I said. I flipped to the last page. This will is null and void, I read, if the beneficiary is convicted of any felony against the estate or the testator. I ripped the will in half, then in half again. I let the pieces fall like confetti over her head. You get nothing, I said. Victoria started to scream. It was a long, high sound of madness. They dragged her out, still screaming. I stood in the silence of my home. I was alive. I was rich. But as I looked at the small, still body of my cat, I knew the price I had paid. I had won the war. But the house felt very, very empty. The sound of tearing paper filled the room. It was a sharp, violent noise that cut through the silence of the death chamber my living room had become. I lay perfectly still on the floor. My eyes slid open just a fraction, watching the shoes of my daughter-in-law move across the Persian rug. She was standing at my heavy oak desk, the one I had bought 30 years ago when I secured my first major city contract. She had the blue velvet envelope in her hands. I held my breath. That envelope contained my last will and testament. It was the document I had finalized 5 years ago. It stated clearly that in the event of my death, the entirety of my estate, including the real estate portfolio, the cash reserves, and the sanitation company, would pass directly to my son, Terrence Jefferson. Despite his flaws, despite his weakness, despite his unemployment, I had never removed him. I had always hoped he would find his way. Victoria ripped the document out of the envelope. She unfolded it under the glow of the desk lamp. I could see her eyes scanning the legal text, darting back and forth hungrily. She let out a short, sharp laugh. "Look at this, Terrence," she whispered, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "He left it all to you. Every single penny. He did not change it. We did not have to do any of this." Terrence was still slumped in the armchair, his face buried in his hands, sobbing quietly. He did not look up. "It does not matter now," Victoria hissed. She turned the paper over in her hands. "If this will stand, you get the money, but I have to wait. I have to wait for probate. I have to wait for you to give me access. And frankly, husband, I do not trust you to do what needs to be done. You might get a conscience. You might try to give it away to charity in his name." She reached into her oversized purse, the one that had concealed the poison earlier. She pulled out a sleek black lighter. She flicked it on. The flame danced into the dim light, reflecting in her eyes. "We are going with the new version," she said. She held the corner of my real will to the flame. The thick bond paper caught fire, slowly curling and blackening. She held it over the heavy brass ashtray on my desk, watching my legacy turn to ash. She watched the names burn. She watched the bequests burn. She watched the love I had for my son turn into smoke that drifted up toward the ceiling fans. When the fire reached her fingertips, she dropped the burning paper into the tray and watched it crumble into nothing. "Goodbye, Wallace," she murmured. Then she reached back into her bag and pulled out a crisp new document. It was the forgery Paul Hayes had created for her, the one that cost $50,000 of my money. She placed it on the center of the desk, smoothing it out lovingly. "This is better," she said. "This one says that due to his declining mental health, Wallace Jefferson leaves full power of attorney and sole executorship to his devoted caretaker and daughter-in-law, Victoria Jefferson. It says Terrence is too emotionally unstable to manage the funds, so I control the trust." She turned to Terrence. "Stand up," she ordered. Terrence stood up, wiping his nose. He looked like a ghost. "Come look at our future," Victoria said. She walked over to the liquor cabinet. She opened the glass doors and took out a bottle of wine. It was a Chateau Margaux 1996, a bottle I had been saving for the birth of my first grandchild. The irony burned in my chest, hotter than the poison she thought I had swallowed. She grabbed a corkscrew. She drove it into the cork with a savage twist. Pop! The sound was festive, grotesque in the presence of what she thought was a corpse. She poured 2 glasses. The red liquid glugged out, looking too much like blood in the low light. She walked over to Terrence and shoved a glass into his hand. "Drink," she commanded. "I cannot," Terrence whispered. "He is lying right there, Victoria. He is dead. He is gone," Victoria corrected, clinking her glass against his hard enough to risk breaking it. "And we are here. To us, Terrence. To the new Jefferson dynasty. To the penthouse. To the millions. To freedom." She lifted the glass to her lips. She closed her eyes, savoring the smell of the expensive vintage. She tilted her head back, ready to swallow the victory she had killed for. I decided that was enough. I lay on the floor, my body stiff from holding the pose, my heart hammering against my ribs, not from the drug, but from a righteous fury that felt like divine judgment. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air she thought she had stolen from me. I lifted my hands, and I clapped. Clap. Victoria froze. The wine glass stopped an inch from her mouth. Clap. Terrence dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, spraying wine over his shoes and my rug. Clap. I sat up. It was not a struggle. I rose from the floor with the fluidity of a man who had spent his life lifting heavy loads. I wiped a smudge of dried milk from my chin with the back of my hand. I adjusted my collar. Victoria stared at me. Her eyes were wide, enormous circles of white in a face that had gone gray. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The glass of wine slipped from her fingers. It hit the floor and exploded. Red wine splashed up the hem of her white dress, looking like a fresh arterial spray. She began to back away, shaking her head violently. "No," she wheezed. "No, you are dead." I checked. No pulse, no breath. I stood up, completely towering over the room. I looked at her. I looked at the fear that was finally eclipsing her greed. "I am a hard man to kill, Victoria," I said, my voice deep and steady, filling the room without shouting. "And you are a terrible doctor. You checked for a pulse, but you did not check for a trick, and you certainly did not check the cameras." Victoria spun around, looking at the corners of the room, looking for the eyes she had missed. "What cameras?" she screamed. "The ones I installed 3 days ago," I said. I gestured to the painting of the Brooklyn Bridge, the one hiding the safe. Behind the bridge. I gestured to the bookshelf. Inside the spine of the encyclopedia. I gestured to the light fixture above us, and the microphone in the chandelier. Victoria looked wild. She looked at the desk where the fake will lay in plain sight. She looked at the ashtray where the ashes of the real will were still smoking. "You cannot prove anything," she shrieked, her voice reaching a hysterical pitch. "You faked your death. That is entrapment. You tricked me." I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "I did not trick you into poisoning my milk, Victoria. I did not trick you into burning my will. I did not trick you into celebrating my murder with my own wine. You did all of that on your own. I just provided the stage." I looked toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. "You can come out now," I called out. "The show is over." The door to the guest bedroom opened. Anika Ross stepped out first. She was wearing a Kevlar vest over her business suit, holding a tablet that was live-streaming the entire event to a secure server. Her face was grim. Behind her stepped a man in a sharp gray suit. It was District Attorney Miller, the toughest prosecutor in New York City. I had known him since he was a beat cop in Harlem, and behind him 4 NYPD detectives filed into the room, their hands on their holsters, their badges gleaming under the lights. Victoria backed up until she hit the desk. She looked at the wall of law enforcement. She looked at Anika. She looked at me. "No," she whimpered. "No, this is not real. This is a nightmare." "It is a nightmare," Victoria District Attorney Miller said, stepping forward. "But it is your nightmare, and you are not waking up." He pointed to the desk. "Secure the evidence," he ordered the detectives. "Bag the ashes. Bag the fake will. Bag the vial in her purse, and bag the milk on the floor." 2 detectives moved past me. They began photographing the scene. The flashbulbs popped blindingly bright, illuminating the spilled wine, the shattered glass, and the dead cat on the rug. Victoria looked at Terrence. "Do something," she screamed. Tell them he is lying. Tell them he is crazy. He is senile." Terrence was on his knees. He was not looking at her. He was looking at me. He was looking at the father he had tried to kill. "He is not crazy," Victoria Terrence whispered. "He is the smartest man I know." Victoria let out a sound of pure animal rage. She lunged for the fake will on the desk, trying to grab it, trying to destroy the proof of her forgery. Detective Ramirez was faster. He grabbed her wrist, mid-air. He spun her around and slammed her against the desk. "Victoria Jefferson, you are under arrest." He recited the words, heavy and final. "For attempted murder in the first degree. For forgery. For grand larceny. For elder abuse. And for animal cruelty." He pulled her arms behind her back. The handcuffs clicked. It was a mechanical sound, a final punctuation mark on her life of freedom. Victoria began to thrash. She kicked out, hitting the detective in the shin. "Get off me!" she screamed. "You have no right. I am pregnant. I am carrying his grandchild. You cannot arrest a pregnant woman." I walked over to her. I stood inches from her face. I looked into her eyes and I saw nothing but a black hole of selfishness. "You are not pregnant, Victoria," I said softly. "We know about the IUD. We have your medical records. And even if you were, you would give birth in prison." Victoria stopped fighting. She went limp in the detective's grip. The lie had run out. The gas was empty. "So, you are a devil," she spat at me, saliva flying from her lips. "You tricked us. You set us up. You are a fraud. I am a father," I said, my voice cracking for the first time. A father who just watched his son watch him die. I looked at Terrence. A detective was pulling him to his feet. He did not resist. He held out his wrists. "Dad," Terrence said. I turned away. I could not look at him. Not yet. "Get them out of here," I said to the room at large. "Get them out of my house." The detectives began to march them toward the door. Victoria was screaming again, screaming that I was a liar, screaming that I had planned it all, screaming that she was the victim. Her voice faded as they dragged her down the hallway into the elevator that would take her down to the street and into the back of a squad car. The apartment suddenly felt very quiet. The air smelled of wine and burnt paper. District Attorney Miller walked over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. "We have everything we need, Wallace," he said quietly. "The video is clear. The audio is clear. The forensic evidence is secured. They are going away for a long time, 20 years minimum, probably life." I nodded. I felt old. I felt tired. "Thank you, Robert," I said, using his first name. Annika walked over. She picked up the tablet. "Sir," she said, "the transfer of assets to the new trust is complete. Your personal accounts are secured. The locks on the building are being changed as we speak." I looked at the empty space where my son used to stand. "Good," I said. I looked down at the rug, at the small, still body of Barnaby, the only creature in this house who had loved me without condition. I knelt down. My knees cracked. I picked him up. He was still warm. "I am sorry, little friend," I whispered into his fur. "I am so sorry." I stood up, holding the cat. I looked at Annika. I looked at the DA. "I am going to bury my cat," I said, "and then I am going to sleep. Please lock the door on your way out." I walked out onto the balcony. The rain had stopped. The city lights of New York were shining bright and indifferent below. I held Barnaby close. I had won the game. I had defeated the enemy. I had kept my fortune. But standing there alone in the cold night air, I realized that the price of victory was a silence so loud it deafened me. My house was safe. But my home was gone. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. It was a cold, sterile box designed to strip away human dignity and replace it with the raw, ugly truth. I stood behind the one-way glass in the observation room watching the final act of my family's tragedy play out. The district attorney stood beside me, his arms crossed, his face grim. On the other side of the glass, Victoria sat handcuffed to the table. She looked small. The bravado she had worn like armor in my apartment was gone, shattered by the reality of steel bars and impending prison time. But even in defeat, she was a viper. She was not crying for forgiveness. She was negotiating for survival. I listened as she leaned forward, speaking rapidly to the two detectives. Her voice was thin and sharp, cutting through the speaker system in the observation room. "It was not my idea," she insisted, her eyes wide and pleading. "You have to believe me. I was scared. Terrence made me do it. He has a temper. You do not know him like I do. He is obsessed with his father's money. He has been talking about killing the old man for years." I felt a physical blow to my chest. Even after everything, even after the poison and the forgery, I was not prepared for this level of betrayal. She was selling her husband, the man she claimed to carry a child for, down the river to save herself. The detective leaned back, looking skeptical. "So you are saying Terrence Jefferson, the man who was crying on the floor while you poured the poison, was the mastermind behind this operation?" "Yes," Victoria said, nodding frantically. "He forced me to buy the drugs. He forced me to fake the pregnancy. He said if I did not help him get the inheritance, he would leave me. He would hurt me. I was a battered wife. I was a hostage." In the adjacent interrogation room, Terrence sat alone. He was not handcuffed to the table. He was just sitting there staring at the wall. But the detectives had done something cruel and necessary. They had piped the audio from Victoria's interrogation into his room. He could hear every word. He could hear the woman he destroyed his life for painting him as a monster. I watched my son on the monitor. At first he just blinked, slow and confused. Then, as Victoria described how he supposedly threatened her with a knife, his face crumpled. It was not the face of a criminal. It was the face of a man whose entire reality had just dissolved. He put his head on the table and let out a sound that the microphone barely picked up. It was a low animal moan of absolute heartbreak. "Turn it off," I told the DA. "He has heard enough." The DA nodded and flipped a switch. The audio in Terrence's room cut out, leaving him in silence. "I need to speak to him," I said. The DA hesitated. "Wallace, that is highly irregular. He is a suspect in an attempted murder case. You are the victim. He is my son," I said, my voice hard. "And I need 5 minutes. Alone. Before he lawyers up. Before he pleads. I need to give him something." The DA looked at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He saw the man who had cleaned up the city for 30 years. 5 minutes, he said. The cameras stay on. I walked down the hallway. My footsteps echoed on the linoleum. The door to Terrence's room was heavy. I pushed it open. Terrence did not look up. He stayed with his head on the metal table, his shoulders shaking. "She is lying," he whispered into his arms. "I never threatened her. I loved her. I did everything for her." "I know," I said. I pulled out the metal chair opposite him and sat down. The sound of the chair legs scraping against the floor made him flinch. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red, his face swollen. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Dad," he croaked. "Dad, I am so sorry. I am so sorry." I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had sat up with when he had fevers. The boy I had put through college, and I felt a wave of sadness so profound it almost drowned me. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was old, yellowed at the edges. It was not a will. It was not a deed. It was a medical report, dated 32 years ago. I slid it across the table. "Read it," I said. Terrence looked at the paper, confused. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. He picked it up. His eyes scanned the technical language, the genetic markers, the conclusion at the bottom. Probability of paternity 0%. He froze. He read it again. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing. "I do not understand," he whispered. "What is this?" "It means I am not your father, Terrence," I said, my voice steady. "Biologically." He shook his head, a violent denial. "No, that is impossible. Mom. You and Mom." "Lucille was a wonderful woman," I said, allowing my voice to soften for the memory of my late wife. "But we had a difficult patch before you were born. We were separated for 6 months. She met someone else, a man who left town the moment he found out she was pregnant. When we reconciled, she told me. She gave me a choice. I could walk away, or I could raise the child as my own." I leaned forward. "I chose you, Terrence. I held you in the delivery room. I cut your cord. I gave you my name. I never told you because I never wanted you to feel like you were anything less than my flesh and blood. I loved you more than if I had made you myself because I chose to love you every single day." Terrence stared at me. The paper shook in his hands. The weight of what I was saying crashed into him. I wasn't just his father by accident of birth. I was his father by act of will. I had saved him before he was even born, and he had repaid that choice by trying to kill me. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because you need to understand what you threw away," I said. "You threw away a love that was unconditional. You threw away a man who chose you over his own pride. And you did it for a woman who is currently in the next room telling the police that you are a psychopath who forced her to commit murder." Terrence looked at the wall toward the room where Victoria was selling him out. A new expression crossed his face. The sorrow was still there, but it was being hardened by something else. Rage. The cold, clear rage of the betrayed. "She said I forced her," he asked. "She said you threatened to kill her," I confirmed. "She said the poison was your idea." "She is cutting a deal, Terrence. She is going to testify against you. She is going to walk away with a light sentence, and you are going to go to prison for 20 years. Terrence stood up. He paced the small room. He looked at the mirror, knowing the detectives were behind it. He looked at the paper on the table, the proof of my love. "I am not his son," he whispered to himself, "and he still saved me." He stopped pacing. He looked at me. For the first time in years, I saw a flash of the man I hoped he would become. He looked me in the eye. "I am going to fix this, Dad," he said. "You cannot fix it, son," I said gently. "You broke it." "I can fix the justice part," he said. He turned to the mirror. He shouted loud and clear, "Detective, come in here. I want to make a statement." The door opened immediately. The lead detective walked in, a notebook in his hand. "You want to confess, son?" the detective asked. "No," Terrence said. "I want to testify. I want to tell you everything. Whose idea it was. Who bought the poison. Who forged the will. Who pushed me every step of the way." He pointed a shaking finger at the wall. "She did it. Victoria. It was her plan. I was weak. I went along with it. I am guilty of being a coward and a thief. But she is the one who wanted him dead, and I am going to make sure she never hurts anyone again." I stood up. My work was done. I had given him the truth, and the truth had set him free, not from prison but from her spell. I walked to the door. Dad, Terrence called out. I stopped, but I did not turn around. "I love you," he said, "and I am sorry I was not the son you deserved." I put my hand on the doorframe. "You were the son I chose, Terrence," I said. "That is what makes this so hard." I walked out. I went back to the observation room. I watched as Terrence sat down and began to speak. He spared no detail. He told them about the night in the Bronx. He told them about the fake pregnancy. He told them about the digoxin. He handed them Victoria on a silver platter. When the detectives went back into Victoria's room, they were not smiling. They did not want to hear her lies anymore. They played her a clip of Terrence's confession. They showed her the statement he had signed admitting to conspiracy and naming her as the primary aggressor. Victoria's face went blank. The mask fell away completely. She did not scream this time. She just stared at the table, knowing that the game was over. She had played her final card, and it was a joker. 2 days later, the charges were formally filed. The district attorney held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse. The microphones were a forest of black foam. The cameras flashed like lightning. "Victoria Jefferson has been charged with attempted murder in the first degree," the DA announced, his voice booming over the crowd. "She is also charged with grand larceny, fraud, elder abuse, and forgery. Due to the premeditated nature of the crime, the use of a lethal substance, and the vulnerability of the victim, we are seeking the maximum penalty." A reporter shouted a question. "What about the husband, Terrence Jefferson?" "Mr. Jefferson has pleaded guilty to conspiracy and fraud," the DA said. "He is cooperating fully with the investigation. In exchange for his testimony against his wife, the state has agreed to a reduced sentence of 10 years. But make no mistake, Victoria Jefferson is the architect of this crime." I watched the news from my new temporary apartment in Manhattan. The headline on the screen read, "Daughter-in-law from hell faces life in prison." Life. It was a strange word. It meant survival. It meant duration. But in the legal system, it meant the end. Victoria was 28 years old. She would be an old woman before she ever saw the outside of a cell again. I turned off the television. The silence in the apartment was heavy. I had won. My fortune was safe. My enemies were vanquished. But as I sat there looking out at the city skyline, I felt a ghost pain in my chest. It was the space where my family used to be. I thought about Terrence sitting in a cell, knowing he wasn't my blood, knowing he had tried to kill the only father he ever had. I thought about the boy I had raised, and I wondered if $50 million was enough to buy a good night's sleep. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and angry red. "It is done," I whispered to the empty room. But as I watched the lights of the city flicker on one by one, I knew that the real verdict hadn't been delivered by a judge. It had been delivered by life, and the sentence was loneliness. The sound of a gavel striking wood is a final sound. It is the sound of an ending and the sound of a beginning. 6 months after the night my daughter-in-law tried to poison me in my own living room, the judge delivered the verdict. Victoria Jefferson was sentenced to 25 years to life for attempted murder, fraud, and elder abuse. She screamed when they took her away. She screamed that it was not fair. She screamed that she was the victim. But for the first time in a long time, nobody was listening. The courtroom was full, but she was entirely alone. I sat in the back row watching the woman who had slapped me dragged out in shackles. I felt no joy. I felt no triumph. I just felt a quiet, hollow relief. It was the feeling of surviving a storm and walking out to see the wreckage, knowing that you can rebuild, but nothing will ever look quite the same again. My son Terrence stood before the judge an hour later. He looked different. The soft, spoiled boy who had let his wife push him around was gone. In his place was a man who looked tired, thin, and haunted. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy and fraud. He accepted his role. He did not beg for leniency. The judge gave him 5 years. With good behavior, he would be out in 2 or 3. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright, blinding sun of a New York afternoon. The reporters were there, of course. They shouted questions, asking how I felt, asking if I forgave them. I ignored them. I walked to the curb where my car was waiting. But it was not the limousine. It was not the town car. It was my old Ford F-150 pickup truck. The paint was faded. The bumper was dented and the engine sounded like a tractor, but it was mine. It was the truck I had bought with my first big check from the sanitation company. It was the truck that had carried me through the mud and the snow to build an empire. I got in and drove to Brooklyn. I had one last piece of business to attend to. The penthouse was empty. I had sold the furniture. I had donated the clothes I had packed away. The few personal items that mattered. The apartment that Victoria had killed for was just a shell of drywall and glass overlooking a city that does not care about your problems. I met the realtor in the lobby. She was a young woman, eager and nervous. "Mr. Jefferson," she said, handing me a check. "It is a cashier, is check for $12 million. The buyers are a tech couple from Silicon Valley. They love the view." I took the check. I did not look at the numbers. I folded it and put it in my pocket. "Thank you," I said. "Take care of the place. It has good bones." I walked out of the building and I did not look back. I walked 2 blocks to the office of the Lucille Jefferson Foundation. It was a new nonprofit I had established named after my late wife, the woman who had saved Terrence even though he was not hers. I walked into the office. Anika Ross was there sitting behind a desk buried in paperwork. She looked up and smiled. It was a genuine smile, a smile that reached her eyes. "Is it done?" she asked. "It is done." I said I pulled the check from my pocket and placed it on her desk. $12 million. Add it to the endowment. This will pay for legal representation for elderly victims of fraud for the next 50 years. Anika picked up the check. She looked at me. "You know, Wallace, you could have kept this. You could have bought an island." I sat down in the chair opposite her. "I do not want an island. Anika, I want a legacy, and I do not want that money. It smells like milk and betrayal. I want it clean. I want it to do the work I should have done years ago." Anika nodded. She put the check in the safe. "So what now?" she asked. "Now I have a visit to make," I said. The drive to the upstate correctional facility took 3 hours. The leaves were changing from green to gold and red. The world was dying and being born again, just like it always does. I listened to old jazz records on the radio, letting the miles roll away. I sat in the visitation room on a metal stool. The glass partition separated me from the inmates. Terrence walked in wearing a gray jumpsuit. He sat down. He did not look at the guards. He looked at me. "Hi, Dad," he said. "Hi, son," I replied. We sat in silence for a moment. The air hummed with things unsaid. "I heard you sold the penthouse," Terrence said. "I did." I confirmed. "The money is gone." "It is all in the trust." Terrence. "The foundation. It is untouchable." Terrence nodded. He did not look angry. He looked relieved. "Good," he said. "I do not want it." It was cursed anyway. I leaned forward toward the glass. "I wanted to tell you something, Terrence. I am not going to be here when you get out." Terrence looked up, panic flaring in his eyes for a second. "What, are you sick?" "No," I said. "I am retiring. For real. This time, I am moving down south. I bought a small cabin near the water. I am going to fish. I am going to read. And I am going to rest." Terrence swallowed hard. "So this is it?" he asked. "This is goodbye." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had chosen, the son I had raised, the son who had broken my heart and then helped me put it back together by finally telling the truth. "I deposited $5,000 in your commissary account," I said. "That is enough to keep you in toothpaste and phone calls for your entire sentence." "But that is it, Terrence." When you walk out of these gates in 3 years, you are on your own. There is no trust fund. There is no job waiting at the company. There is no safety net. Terrence looked down at his hands. I know, he whispered, and thank you, Dad, for everything. I mean it. I did not deserve you. I stood up. You made a mistake, Terrence, a terrible life-ending mistake, but you owned it, and that makes you a man. Now you have to build your own life. You have to build it from scratch, just like I did. And I think for the first time in your life, you might actually be able to do it. I put my hand on the glass. Goodbye, son. Terrence put his hand on the glass, matching mine. Goodbye, Dad. I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I heard the buzzer sound, signaling the end of the visitation. I walked out into the prison parking lot. The air was crisp. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. I walked to my truck. Leaning against the passenger door was Anika. She had changed out of her power suit. She was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. She looked younger, softer. Did you tell him? She asked. I told him, I said. And how did he take it? Like a man, I said. Anika smiled. She opened the passenger door. So where are we going, old man? I got into the driver's seat. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a familiar, comforting sound. We are going fishing, I said. Anika laughed. She climbed in and slammed the door. You know, I have never fished in my life, she said. You will learn, I said, putting the truck in gear. You are smart. You figure things out. We drove out of the parking lot, hitting the highway, heading south. The city was behind us. The skyscrapers, the penthouses, the boardrooms, the courts. They were all in the rearview mirror, shrinking with every mile. I looked at Anika. She wasn't my blood. She wasn't my daughter by birth, but she was the one who had stood by me. She was the one who had fought for me. She was the family I had found in the wreckage. I thought about Victoria sitting in her cell, blaming the world for her fate. I thought about Terrence learning to live without a cushion, and I thought about myself. Wallace Jefferson, the garbage man who became a king. I realized then that the greatest wealth a man can have isn't in a bank account, it isn't in bricks and mortar. It is in the ability to look in the mirror and like what you see. It is in the ability to sleep at night knowing you lived by a code. I turned up the radio. The road stretched out ahead of us, open and free. Money can buy you a wedding at the plaza. I thought as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in colors that no artist could capture. It can buy you a silk dress and a diamond ring. But it cannot buy you character. It cannot buy you loyalty, and it certainly cannot buy you peace. The price of character is high. It costs you friends. It costs you comfort. Sometimes it costs you your family. But the return on investment is infinite. I smiled. The road was long, but I had plenty of gas, and for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't carrying anyone else's trash. I was just driving. This is Wallace Jefferson signing off. If you enjoyed this story, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. And if you have ever had to cut toxic family out of your life to save yourself, hit that like button. You are not alone. Stay strong, stay honest, and never ever hand over your keys. The true measure of wealth is never found in a bank account or a real estate portfolio, but in the integrity of one's character. Victoria chased a lifestyle she hadn't earned and lost her freedom in the process. I learned that protecting your peace sometimes requires the painful act of pruning your own family tree. We often mistake tolerance for love, but true love does not exploit. It respects. In the end, the most expensive thing you will ever own is your dignity. Never let anyone, not even your own flesh and blood, put a price tag on it. If you believe that respect must be earned and that justice is best served, cold hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories where the truth always wins.